And now it's 4 o'clock. So we are in the Washington City Council chambers. Today is Wednesday, February 23rd, and we are here for our regular scheduled council meeting. You can also follow our meetings on our YouTube live broadcast. To start, as we continue to have our invocations offered by the Interfaith Council, we have Brother Tim Morton of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints to offer our invocation this evening.
Before I do, let me just say a word to introduce who the St. George Interfaith Council is. This is our 13th year, actually, so it's been around a long time, and consists of 22 or so congregations from the whole area, some from Washington as well. You're going to have people offering prayers who are Buddhist, who are Muslim, who are Presbyterian, Catholic, Methodist, all churches, many from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. So in those 13 years, the presidents have all served for 3 years. The first one from the Presbyterian Church, then Solomon's Porch, the New Promise Lutheran, and we just released our Rabbi Helene Einbinder as our fourth president, and Carol Drake from the Catholic Church has taken over as president with another Lutheran as vice president. So it's well established, and we've had you come to our crop walk from time to time, and we're just thrilled to be here. Thank you for inviting us, and I think it's a great opportunity to appreciate the diversity of people that live in our community here in Washington County and Washington City. So thank you very much. If you'll join me in prayer. Our Father in heaven, we're so thankful this day that we can be part of this great community. We're thankful for those who serve here in Washington City to enhance the land that we live in. We're thankful this day for the rain and snow that we've received. We pray for more. We pray that this drought might end. We're thankful for the beauty of this land. We're thankful for the blue skies. We're thankful for those who serve us, especially in law enforcement and first responders, and we pray a blessing to be upon them and upon all those who might participate in this meeting today, that they might say those things that they've been inspired to say. And we ask a prayer of inspiration with those who are making decisions, that they might feel thy touch, thy inspiration as they contemplate the decisions that need to be made. We're thankful for the wonderful land that we live in, for the opportunity we have to discuss freely these issues, to be part of the religious freedom that exists in this land. Now we pray a blessing upon all those who might participate in this meeting, and this we ask in the name of thy Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you, Brother Morton. We appreciate the Interfaith Council and your involvement. I have asked Officer Roberto Piedra to come forward and lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
All right. Can everybody please stand? Follow me on the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. At this time, I will just make note that we do need to go into closed session for item 14B, which would be pending or potential litigation. And I'll call for a motion to approve the agenda.
Mayor, I can make that approval of the agenda for our regular council meeting, February 23rd, 2022, with the addition that we do have need for closed session.
I have a motion by Ivy.
Second.
Second by Martinson. All in favor?
Aye.
The agenda is approved. I'll give a few announcements and then call for any others that I may have missed. Friday, February 25th is kind of a county-wide streets cleanup event for employees of Washington City and council members if they would like. We are meeting at the exit 13 near the Grapevine Trailhead parking at 7:30 a.m. And we will disperse and clean along I-15 from exits 10 to 13 with Washington City employees. And that is limited to employees because it's a UDOT overseen cleanup. So all of us are invited to be there if we would like. There's also a Love Where You Live cleanup event, which is happening that same day, Friday the 25th, and that's going to be from 3 to 5 p.m. And that will be a cleanup along the Southern Parkway and meeting there on the Southern Parkway at exit 7 near the airport. So you could do one or both of those if you like, and residents are invited, encouraged to do the one on the Parkway. Saturday, February 26th is the Lincoln Day Dinner with the Washington County Republican Party. The County Fair Parade and Kickoff is on our consent agenda tonight, but that is scheduled for April 19th, just to kind of get that on your radar. And Cotton Days is also on our consent agenda tonight, but that's coming up quickly, and that will be from April 25th through May 1st. Council, are there any other announcement that I didn't already address?
There's state championship baseball going on right now, Mayor. That's the only thing I can really report on.
Yeah, it's pretty good games, pretty good games. Great. Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to item 3, which is reports of officers from assigned committees. Should we start at this end and go that way? Can I put you on the spot, Councilmember Martinson?
Yeah, you'll get a report from the Youth Council today, so I'll leave that up to them because they will do a much better job than I will in their
Perfect.
presentation. So
Perfect. Sounds great.
Mayor, I had a chance to meet with the Mosquito Abatement District a week or two ago. And boy, it was eye-opening. They do a lot of behind-the-scenes work that we don't even know about. And, you know, they were telling me a little bit about their operation. It's very impressive. And if we don't know they exist, I guess they're doing their job. So so we can thank them during the summer when we don't have mosquitoes. But that's a good committee to be on. Thank you.
I appreciate that update. Thank you both. Councilmember Coates.
Nothing to report. No meeting since the last meeting. So
Okay,
next week we'll have plenty to report on. So
sounds good. Councilmember Ivy.
So Mayor, I do have quite a lengthy report this time of year with the legislative session. There's a lot to report, so I'll try to move through it quickly. Like to report that we did have our first public safety meeting with Chief Williams and Chief Evans, and it was great to meet with them and talk about that new committee and look forward to working with them. Actually went over with the art committee that I'm on, met with Deb Bice, and we toured the Arrowhead Gallery to get kind of an idea of what we would like someday in Washington, to kind of get an idea of what they do there and what space they need and how to go about that. Land Use Task Force is still talking. They don't meet as often during the session, but again, the topic is in eminent domain, and I'll keep you posted on that. There'll be more coming. Legislative policy update. I tried to choose some bills that we've talked about that I felt would be important and very relevant to our city. So I'll just kind of go through those, Mayor. If anyone has any questions, please stop me, and if I can answer them, then I certainly will. SB 115, that was a firearm preemption, which makes it so that cities can't enact gun restriction. That has passed, and so now the state has oversight over a lot of the firearm preemption for the state. HB 135, the open meetings bill, failed in the Senate. The Senate felt like that there was plenty of opportunity for people to speak if they want to in a public meeting or a public setting. Senator Vickers, our senator, voted against that, and we were also opposed to that for specific reasons that I won't go into right now. Another one that is a big one that we've talked about is HB 242. This is the secondary water amendment. And I think the important thing to say about this is that all indicators says that this will pass. And what this means is that the cities in Utah will be required to have a secondary water system by a certain date. Now, the upside to this is that the state is prepared to use ARPA money to help fund that. And so we want to make sure that we're on the front side of that and recognize our needs. But the date on that is January 2030. The rub against this bill is that it appears by a lot of our committee that it's an unfunded mandate, that it requires something that is not going to be funded. So we'll have to take a good look at that going forward, but that looks like it will indeed pass. We've talked about HB 151, which is retail incentives. It is with Senate Business Labor Committee on their agenda today. In fact, they're meeting right now. It's expecting a second substitute bill with additional amendments. The thought is that that will change. And of course, that will affect our ability to be able to give retail incentive for bigger companies that want to relocate here and want some tax incentives. So there's some guidelines on that. There is more leeway now than the original bill. And then HB 172 is a bill that actually, in just the fewest amount of words, is it expedites the process for RP&P applications for the BLM. They realize that those delays and those reports are expensive and time consuming, and this has direct effect with another bill that we spoke about at our work meeting the other day. SB 34 is it's actually SB 34 plus. If you try to find this on the website, it's not numbered. This is actually a holdover bill from 4 years ago. That's why it has the plus. It deals with affordable housing modifications. The thought is that they want to create intelligent density zoning to address the housing crisis. State has said they don't want to take over control of city zoning, but the expectation is that city zoning meet the needs, and that if we do it, so there's different levels of pushback on that. They feel like the cities are saying, well, we want to protect our way of life, and so we don't want to increase densities, but yet we all recognize we need to be effective in that affordable housing component of of our current situation. What this bill does, though, is it does mandate minimums and housing plans and spot zonings and minimum densities, and the whole idea is you've got to go vertical on smaller lots to achieve that. We spoke briefly about the bill that Senator Lee has brought forward. Mayor, we just remind you that we need to get an agenda item for that for our work meeting, and there's more to come on that. I have an update on that I'll give at our next work meeting. And then, an interesting fact that I learned in talking about SB 34 plus is that the net in migration is greater than our generational in-state growth. So we've had more people move in than generational growth here in this state. So that kind of speaks loudly to what our housing concerns are as well. Anyway, it concerns me a little bit. I think that we have a better ability to address those things here than state, but we'll keep you posted on that as it comes forward. So SB 66 passed. This was a bill that had to do with e-bikes. It's one that I think I spoke with several of you about, that we actually misinterpreted the original bill, that we thought it was opposing e-bikes on trails. It actually was reinforcing their right to be there. And so we changed our position and supported that. It looks like that will pass very soon. Let's see, not wanting to miss anything. And the last thing that I want to mention, Mayor, if you would allow me just a little leeway, this isn't really a committee assignment, but it's something that I think is important. One of our great veterans of Utah, Colonel Val Halverson, who was the World War II pilot that was known as the Candy Bomber, passed away. And if you're not familiar with that story, it will warm your heart to learn a little bit about that. But after the war was over, he met some children at the fence of the airport, and he walked over and he gave them a piece of gum and had to tear the gum in pieces. And as he was walking away, they were taking the wrapper and giving it to other kids to smell. Well, that touched his heart. He decided he needed to do all that he could. And so he actually started sending home for candy and took all the rations from all the other officers that he could get. And he started dropping them in with little parachutes that he had made out of handkerchiefs. And he became known as the Candy Bomber. The operation was called Operation Little Vittles. But Mayor, I apologize for taking so much time, but there's even a lot more stuff that we could share. The legislature will run until next Friday, when they'll have closing sessions. So if there's anything that you've heard about, any bills or things that are concerning you, please put them on our radar. It's going to get fast and furious. So I appreciate your time, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilmember Ivy. Good report. Councilmember Casperson.
Well, I met with the Cotton Days Committee, and I just want to say they are a group of amazing people. They do so much, and I actually didn't realize how much you guys all do. if you guys have any questions about everything, as it gets closer, we can talk about more about each of the events. But they did ask that we try to figure out a time that we can try to attend the events as a council, and try to be there to support and everything. And so we'll also be doing a cleanup too as it gets closer to the Cotton Days events and everything. So do you guys have any questions? Did you guys saw it on the?
I'm excited for the junior rodeo again. I want to make sure to hit that one this year. I've been to the other events, but I haven't made it to that one. So I'm committed to the junior rodeo.
It's going to be good. All the stuff that they have is awesome. Do you guys want to add anything?
Do we get to be in the parade?
I think so, yeah.
I love parades. Thank you.
Parades.
You'll get to be a candy bomber of sorts, but from a golf
Candy
cart
bomber.
rather than an airplane.
We're gonna have to change some things around to make sure he gets. Yeah.
Thank you, Councilmember Casperson. I just have a few reports from my committees from the Dixie MPO. The regional transportation plan was amended to reflect the updates to our recent city master transportation plan approval. So those have now been put onto the regional transportation plan. They also announced that the Tokerville bypass groundbreaking is happening tomorrow, Thursday, February 24th at 11 a.m. And it's at the racetrack off Westfield Road, if any of you want to go out to the Tokerville bypass. But that's a big project, and it'll take a lot of that pressure off that main road in Tokerville, especially that traffic over to Zion National Park. We haven't had another meeting with the Washington County Water Conservancy District, but I don't know if you noticed, but when you came in, there was a display that shows watering times. So they've provided us banners and rack cards and social media material that will continue to promote water conservation and just the little things, and especially in terms of how often to irrigate your yards. And certainly we're very grateful for the moisture that we're receiving right now with the snow in the mountains and rain in the valleys, and maybe even a little snow here. I did have the opportunity to meet with EDC Utah this morning for economic development, so we're catching up on some of that stuff. I know Rusty Hughes is looking forward to giving her department introduction today, and she's well known and well involved with that group. And then lastly, I'll just give you the update that the interviews went very well for the public affairs officer, and we'll just keep you posted as we continue to move forward there. And those are all the feedback I have for the council on my assignments. We'll move on to, if there's nothing else, is there anything else? If not, we'll move on to item 4, city manager report.
Thank you, Mayor. I just have a couple of projects to update the council and the public on. The Washington Dam Road project is quite a large, difficult project, but it continues to move forward and it's doing really well. Should be completed in 4 to 6 weeks or so. So with construction projects, we'll have an emphasis on the or so. So it could be a little bit longer, but it's moving along really well, and it'll get finished soon. Also, we have signal lights going up on Washington Dam Road at the 3090 and 3650 south intersections. Materials have been ordered and some of that has arrived, and we'll be putting out an RFP to have those installed. So those should be done this summer at some point.
You meant Fields Road, right?
You said Dam Road, but I think you meant
Sorry.
Fields Road.
Washington Fields Road. Too many Washington roads. Why didn't I name them all Washington? That's all I have, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll move on to item 5. Any declarations of abstentions or conflicts?
Yeah, Mayor, item 6I. We represent the applicant on that. We did that final platform.
Great. Duly noted. Anything else, council?
Let me clarify 6BI.
Yeah, that gets a little technical. Thank you. All right, so we'll move on to item 6, which is our consent agenda. Item 6A is seeking approval for the minutes from city council meetings of 1/26, 2/7, 2/9, and 2/16 of 2022. Item 6B is to approve an amendment to the final plat for Canyon Greens Commercial Center located at 2303 North Coral Canyon Boulevard. Item 6C, special events. 6CI is to approve a special event for the Washington County Fair Parade and Kickoff, and we've reviewed that application. We appreciate their representation here. Item 6CII is to approve a special event for the Wilson Electronics Company picnic. And item 6CIII is to approve a special event for Cotton Days, which we also appreciate the city and those committee members being here. Is there any brief discussion on those items? If not, I'll call for a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Mayor, I motion that we approve the consent agenda.
I have a motion by Henderson,
Second.
second by Martinson. All in favor?
Aye.
The
Aye.
consent agenda is approved unanimously. We'll
Mayor.
move on to,
Sorry, I just want to make note that I'm a non-vote on 6BI for the record.
duly noted. Recorder, did you get that? Councilmember
I
Coates
did.
abstained on 6BI.
Thank you.
All right, item 7, this is introduction and swearing in ceremony for newly hired police officer Kyle Little and animal control officer Alex Piedra. I'll call Chief Williams to come forward.
He's leaving. Yeah, that's what we thought.
Well, this is an exciting time for these officers and their families, and we appreciate the support that's here.
He's really nervous. His family's coming in, so we'll do them both at the same time. And up here with me is Officer Kyle Little. Kyle started his career in Hurricane City, so we have to do a little bit of retraining, but not much. We're excited to have him here with us. Our next officer is Officer Alex Piedra, who's starting in our Animal Control Division. His brother works for us already in law enforcement. And he's got some family support here.
While we're waiting, I have to say the beards, man, looking good on the police force with the beards. So
Thank you. Calendar's coming out. Yeah, anybody know any appropriate jokes for this crowd? No? That leaves me out, yeah. We're asking.
Yeah, I can see a few that I will not be calling up for that.
It's your party, right? All right, we'll go ahead and raise your right hand. Say aye and then repeat your name, okay? I, Kyle Little, Alex Piedra, do solemnly swear that I will support, obey, and defend the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of Utah. I do also solemnly swear that I will support, obey, and defend the laws and ordinances of Washington City, and I will discharge the duties of my office with fidelity. Congratulations. I'll invite Mrs. Kyle Little to come up and pin on Kyle's badge.
I love this tradition.
Hey, now this is customary in Washington City. You kind of seal it, make it official.
Oh, no. Chief, as mayor, I want to take the liberty just to invite them to come up and just get a few quick pictures first with their families, and then with all those who, the Brotherhood of the Forest that has come to support. Could we start with the Piedra family? Come forward and get a couple pictures there, and then we'll ask the little family, and then we'll get a big group picture.
It's very nice.
Got two good sons here. Great family.
Photo by name, not by number.
It's official. I know you've been on for a little bit.
Yes. Must be wife and baby, mom. Brothers. Gotta have a wide angle camera for that. Yeah. Share with the other council members what's
Spot Nash.
Thank you.
We appreciate you, Chief Williams. We appreciate each of you here, and welcome Officers Little and Piedra. Okay, now another great group in uniform of sorts. Item 8A is our youth council, and it's the presentation of their annual report. And I see Mayor Chrislyn Wilson here. Invite her to come forward with the youth council.
Thank you. Mayor Staley and City Council, I stand before you today to give our year-to-date report on our activities and upcoming events. I am the Mayor of Washington City Youth Council, Chrislyn Wilson. This is my second year with the Youth Council and elected by my peers to serve. We thank you for the opportunity to be aligned with and in support of the city. The Youth Council is going into its 12th year, being established in 2010. We appreciate the time Councilman Kurt Ivey has worked with us, and we want to express our thanks with a certificate of appreciation for the legacy he has left the Washington City Youth Council, for his support, encouragement, and informing us on city matters for the past 2.5 years. Go ahead and give that to you. We are also extending our arm of gratitude to Councilman Martinson, for coming on board with us now. We look forward to working with and getting to know him. We welcome you, Councilman Martinson. The Youth Council have been meeting for our regular meetings the first and third week of each month at the Covington Mansion. We feel the importance of being in the home and keeping the memories of the Covington family alive and the home clean. We thank you for letting us meet there, since we always meet the first and third Wednesday of each month and are trying to work around the City Council's work schedule meetings by starting earlier so Councilman Martinson can join us. It is hard for those that have always had other commitments at this time. We are still working through this adjustment. Starting executive meetings at 4:15 and council at 5 p.m. really work best for us. Our year started with helping the Lions Club, which we have done for many years, with the 4th of July by manning their games and concessions and celebrate the city tradition at Veterans Park. At the end of August, we held our retreat with the theme Today's Footprints, Tomorrow's Legacy. The purpose of the retreat is to connect with each other, understand the importance of commitment to belonging to the Youth Council, calendar, review our bylaws, and how important communication and relationships are being in a good leader. At the end of the retreat, we vote on our new officers, where everyone leaves with a position. Our annual trick-or-treat was again a success at the Covington home. It was a lot of fun for all that attended and was a part of it. All volunteers, everything free to the community, and was supported by the Washington City Youth Council. Veterans Day parade and events keep our country and flag close to us. It is an important time to share and remember. Christmas in Dixie was a very well attended this year. We want to thank Tess at the Community Center for all her hard work and helping make it a success. It was one of the largest groups that we have had come visit Santa at the Covington home, and then ventured down to the granary with the fun experience of meeting the Grinch and Cindy Lou Who. Ralph's, who let the dog out, fun run in conjunction with the city's marathon, was so much fun. We love doing this each year, and we would like to see this grow even bigger. What an amazing trip to the state capitol on February 6th during the session, with the city council, city recorder, and city manager joining us. A special thanks to Senator Don Ibsen and his intern Jamie Lundberg for helping put this day together by filling the schedule as we requested. We love the night tour with Senator Evan Vickers, Senator Don Ibsen, and Representative Brooks. Monday morning, we sit in the Senate Appropriations Committee meeting on criminal law, introduced in the House and Senate, followed by a special meeting with the Governor Spencer Cox in the Gold Room, where he explained the legislative process and the part he played. After which we presented him a certificate of appreciation for the legacy he was leaving the youth of Utah, with a statement, "The future of our state is sitting in a classroom today." A picture of him and his wife, Abby, when he surprised us with a visit at the Covington home while we were giving a live tour during Cotton Days. The day ended with lunch with our senators and official analysis ball and lobbyist shoots. Special treat to a finger-licking good Ernie's chicken. A very educational, memorable day. Thank you to Senator Don L. Ibsen for hosting us, and the city council, city manager, and city recorder for joining us.
Can I just add on that, Mayor Wilson? Senator Ibsen may or may not have been on the floor that morning when we had the chicken strips. It's hard to say.
Applications are now online for the youth age 15 by the start of next school year to 18 years of age. Applicants must reside in the zip code 84780 to apply for the Washington City Youth Council 2022-2023. Go online to washingtoncity.org/youth council. There you can download the application and return to the community center. Deadline March 16th. We have 10 spots open this year. We will be helping the Lions Club, as we have for many years, with their annual Easter egg hunt Saturday, April 16th at 10 p.m. at Veterans Park. We are looking forward to helping at Cotton Days in the children's area and live tour of the Covington home, along with the Historical Society's Ice Cream Social. Also helping at the Youth Rodeo. We love the city's tradition of Cotton Days. We feel it is one of our most important events of the year to honor our heritage and those that built our beautiful town. I have reported on a few of the events we volunteer for. We also host events, help at the community center with the after-school program. We just keep busy and being out there in the community representing the youth and the city of Washington. Since July until now, the Washington City Youth Council has volunteered and served 3,612 hours. Our graduation is May with a ceremony. Our parents are invited, and we would love to have you all in attendance as well. We'll be making a special presentation to the city, which will be the legacy of the Washington City Youth Council 2021-2022. The date is tentatively set for May 18th, and invitations will be coming out. If there are any questions, we would like to take them.
Council, questions for the Youth Council?
Mayor, I don't really have a question, but just a sincere thank you. You certainly were a highlight of my life for 2.5 years. Carmen, thank you. Thank you, Mayor. You're inspirational with your service, your dedication. Boy, I just, when I say youth today, I say that there's never been a better generation. So best of luck to each of you.
Thank you.
I particularly enjoyed you highlighting all of those events, and I could think back to your involvement at so many of these, at the parades, at the Christmas in Dixie, and you just represent us so well. We're just so grateful for the service. I mean, you really are the light, the energy that that keeps this community together, and you're a great example. Council, any other thoughts, comments, questions for this Youth Council?
The one thing I have is just take advantage of this time. I never had that opportunity and I had to learn the hard way through being elected and working through it. So you're learning a lot. Just take advantage of it. So
it's good advice. I think you're going to be happy when we get down to item 11. The schedule's going to work out really well. Councilmember Martinson's already lobbying for his ability to be involved there fully. So that's gonna be resolved here in about 15 or 20 minutes. But before I let you go, is it possible for Councilmember Ivy, for his 2.5 years of service there, to get a picture with your group, with Carmen, and then also if we get another picture with Ben Martinson, Councilmember Martinson, for the service that he's going to render over the next however many years, hopefully many years.
Right here.
All right, and then after we'll have Councilmember Martinson.
Yeah, thank you. Oh, you'll just book in. Okay. We thank you again for this time to report to you and the support you have given us through this year. With our theme this year, Today's Footprints, Tomorrow Legacy, we hope to be remembered. We have a copy of today's reading for each of you. If you guys want to pass these out to them. Quick. And then we apologize, Ben, your last name was spelled wrong, so we apologize for that mistake. But we'll get it down by the end of the year. Thank you.
Thank you, Youth Council. You're welcome to stay for a few minutes or as long as you want, or to go if you want to. Moving along with our agenda is item 9. Item A is Rusty Hughes with a department introduction for economic development. Rusty is our economic development director.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. In the interest of time, I'm going to speed up this presentation a little bit. I know it will be a review for a few of you, and I've made some notes here, so I'm just going to pass these along. So I think it's important to give a little bit of history on economic development in Washington City, and then I'll give you a little bit of history on my involvement with that. I had the pleasure of spending the previous 7 years with a regional economic development group called St. George Area Economic Development, used to be called Washington County Economic Development Council, before having the pleasure to serve Washington City. And the first thing I did, I've been here a little less than a year, and the first thing I did was an assessment of the area and just kind of how development has occurred. And so I just want to go over that. We have the second largest population in Washington County. We're a little close to 30,000 residents. And over the last 8 years, 98% of our development has been residential. It's far outpaced our commercial. And when this occurs, residents have to travel to neighboring municipalities to purchase goods and services. They also go there for work. So working people like to spend money closer to where they work, or they tend to spend money closer to where they work. Aside from housing, transportation is the highest household cost for most families. A small portion of what is collected overall from property and sales tax are the two largest revenue sources for the municipalities to provide services to its residents. Bedroom communities that don't generate sales tax revenues are more likely to increase property taxes to generate the revenue needed to maintain residential communities. And this chart gives you a kind of an overview of the median cost to provide community service for each dollar of revenue raised in each of those categories. So when this happens, when residents are spending money outside of the community that they live in, then they're kind of supporting that cost to provide residential service in neighboring communities. If this happens over time, then cities have to focus on, can't afford things like public amenities such as parks, trails, things like that. They have to focus on fire, police, the essentials. This is I had a question on this one last time, so this is a little bit of an overview. This is Washington County assessed taxable value of 2020. So this wasn't the revenues received, but this is the taxable value, and these are taxed at different rates. Primary residential is taxed at 55% of the assessed value. Non-primary residential and businesses are taxed at 100% of assessed value. And then the Utah Greenbelt Act allows agriculture property to be assessed and taxed based on its productivity capability instead of the prevailing market value, which is why that number is so small and why you see the vacant land value or assessed value is larger. So we have a lot of farmland here, and of course the idea behind that is that farms produce food, and that's pretty valuable. Just to put that into perspective, this is Washington County versus Utah. This is kind of how the breakdown is for Washington County versus Utah on those same taxing categories. So if you'll notice, our commercial and industrial is about 15.9%. This is, again, just for the whole county, not just the city. So that would be much lower for Washington City. And then overall in Utah, that commercial and industrial is about 25%. This is our portion of property tax revenues. The property tax revenues that residents and commercial enterprises pay in Washington County, about 49%, 49.92% goes to local schools. And you'll see other categories for school, but it's about 60% overall that goes to schools, and 12% goes to the city. And then this is our portion of state sales tax. So when, and these are rough because sales tax has some variety. It varies a little bit, but it's 6.7, roughly 1% of the 6.75% sales tax charged on goods sold within our city limits comes back to the city. And it's split into two categories, the red and the blue there, because one is point of sale, and then the other is the option that comes back through the state. So it initially goes to the state and then comes back. And then although Washington City is mostly residential, sales tax still makes up 65% of our total revenue from these two main revenue sources. And then an example of this is that the Community Redevelopment Agency, which is actually this body, or the RDA, as you know it because it was formed in 2013 when it was RDA, recently approved a sales tax incentive for the Sienna Hills Auto Mall. If the auto mall performs at 25% of its projections, they'll be the largest generator of sales tax in Washington City. So we did make an investment of sales tax into that project, and it has quite a significant return. And speaking of returns, when we talk about value of development and value of commercial development, the one thing I would like you to remember is not all commercial development is created the same. Not all has the same revenue sources, but these are three things that are really a simple way to break it down. Does it bring in sales tax, and does it bring in property tax, and does it bring in good paying jobs for residents? Put dollars in people's pockets and they spend them locally, and they have commercial development so that they have goods and services close to where they live. That helps our economy overall, and it helps us continue to provide great service to the residents of Washington City. I'm going to quickly go over these development types. I know that Mayor Staley has been using this slide, and so I appreciate Councilman Ivy also getting the word out in the newsletter. And if you have any questions about this, I would be happy to talk to any of you at any time about this. But I'm just going to go over a few different types of developments and how they work together. So residential is, well, a variety of compatible housing helps support commercial development, and affordable housing helps boost the availability of labor in the area. Recruiting talent to the area becomes harder when the cost of living increases and changes the demographic of people that move to the area. This is, oh, I'm sorry, I was one slide ahead. So office, in addition to offering these values, they're looking for proximity to clients, good transportation, parking, and proximity to food and lunch places. So office and residential together helps to support retail. So new commercial development means residents benefit from better access to products and services and places to work. High quality commercial development means that residents also benefit from property taxes generated from capital investment and sales tax resulting from tax dollars flowing into their community. So you've heard that saying, retail follows rooftops. We're getting a lot of rooftops in Washington City, and we're starting to reach those critical numbers where we can attract some of this commercial and particularly retail. They look at certain demographics and certain numbers, and we follow that closely and work with them to give them boots on the ground data that maybe you can't pull from a national source. And then industrial. Industrial is great for capital infrastructure investment because usually it's property taxes are on both the building and also the equipment. It diversifies the industry base, provides quality jobs, and reduces traffic. Industrial developers, 4 of the first 5 things that they look at have to do with labor. And this is how we work together on a local level, a regional level, and a state level. So I work with It's important to leverage these strategic partnerships at each level of economic development. Washington City is a certified development-ready community and has a great relationship with EDC Utah and other regional economic development organizations within the area. These are the three main opportunities for engagement. I think that there is opportunities for engagement for any of the council and mayor that would like to engage on these three different levels. I'd be happy to talk to you about those in more detail. And then just an overview of a few things that economic development has done within Washington City in the last little while. The first is that we put together a public infrastructure district policy. We have that on our website. We can go over that another time for those of you who are not familiar with it. And then we have created a community reinvestment area, and we have the potential to create more of those if we do an assessment and find that it's of value. And then of course there's tax increment financing, which is a mechanism for funding some of these developments that fall within those. The other ones in black are opportunities that are available throughout the state. Some will apply for us and some won't. Like many of the excellent people that I have the pleasure of working with at Washington City, I'm passionate about what I do. And like you, I'm a proud resident of Washington City. Growth comes with growing pains, but it also comes with an immense responsibility, and it brings opportunities. And I'm excited and honored to be in this position and to be serving the community that I've called home for 20 years. Do you have any questions?
Council, any questions for Rusty?
Mayor, I would just tell Rusty, great presentation. We appreciate your insight, and it certainly helped me to understand the importance of commercial development, that it really is a benefit for our city all the way around. So thank you.
I'd just like to say fantastic presentation, and you know, you're doing a fantastic job. I had a conversation with my wife the other day, and one common phrase in my household growing up here in Washington was, "We're going to town." And that usually meant we're going over there to go shopping. And so how important it is moving forward in the next 5 to 10 years for us to, you know, get on the stick as far as commercial development goes, so that we can have additional places to shop, to go for entertainment, for restaurants. And I'm excited that you're here to help us move there. So this is going to be fantastic. So
Thank you. We do have some challenges, but we're in a great position. One being that we'll be at the center of the growth in Washington County. So that's a good plug out there for retail that may be interested in one of our 3 exits that will be available in the coming years.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention, I think you're doing a great job, Rusty, and we should keep moving forward, and kind of maybe in a month or so, or whenever you feel appropriate, Mayor, to put on a work session and kind of talk about some of our main goals in that commercial, like kind of fine tune it when we get a sec. So
I just want to tell you, I appreciate you too, and I'm grateful that you sit down and, you know, talk to me and ask, you know, answer all my questions too, when I've gone to you too. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So Rusty wasn't available in January when everybody else gave their reports, and we're glad to be able to get her on the schedule. It took a little bit to fit her in, but I think as those of you who have met with her recognize, she's offered her help and she's wonderful. So please use her when you have a chance. She's very knowledgeable and willing to help. So thank you.
And I'm hopeful that our neighbors will come to town here when they need to do shopping in the future. We'll turn the tables just a little bit. That's certainly the goal. Thanks again. Well done. Okay, moving on to item number 10. 10A is Washington City Investment Quarterly Report. I've asked City Treasurer Carrie Wheelwright to come and present to the council on this time.
Mayor, Council, I thank you for inviting me to your meeting. I apologize first off, this report was actually scheduled on 2 previous occasions and was canceled one time because of an attendance problem and canceled a second time because of a time problem in the meeting. So I apologize for being so late getting here, but we'll give you the information that we have. First off, since we have 3 new council people and essentially a new mayor, we don't have anyone who has a lot of experience with the investment committee and doesn't know much about what we do with that investment committee. So I have given you a copy in your packet of the investment policy. About 12 years ago in Washington City, we decided that we were going to try and earn more money with the money that we had sitting at that point in time. Instead of just putting it in the Public Treasurer's Investment Fund, why we decided we were going to investigate outside investing, which is what we did. And that's why we came up with this particular document right here. And there's a number of pages to it. I understand that. I hope you've had the opportunity to look through it and maybe find some questions that you may have. But each year we review that and we revise that document in accordance with the Utah Money Management Council rules and regulations that we are obligated to follow. We can't just go out and invest in anything that we want to invest in. They tell us what type of investments we can invest in. They tell us how much we can invest in each one of those types of investments, and that is all covered in that particular document that we have there. The main things that we want to stress with this investment policy is, first off, safety. We don't want to take any risks that we don't have to take because this is taxpayer money that we are dealing with. We're trying to make it grow. We don't want it to go down. So we look very carefully at the interest. We look very carefully at the credit risk that we may have. And of course, we have to deal with a company that is approved by that Utah Money Management Council when we invest our money. So much of that is all included in that document. And as you read through that, if you have questions, you're more than welcome to come and ask me questions, and you can stop by my office if you can find it. That was supposed to be a joke.
I don't think any of our fobs actually work to get into where your office
I don't think
is.
they know where it is either. I will make a joke because when Mayor Staley was a Councilman Staley, I invited him to my office several times to come and talk to me, and he never did. So
I couldn't get in, but once I have been there since being mayor, and you have beautiful pictures of all the amazing places you've traveled on the wall.
one of the things I would like to point out about the investment policy so that I don't take too much of your time is on page 9, that is the last page. One of the things that I mentioned was safety. And on page 9, we have some internal controls that we have put in place. I don't just operate this all by myself. I have a committee that advises me as we meet supposedly on a quarterly basis. But because of the pandemic, it's been a little bit difficult. We had a meeting scheduled in January, but one member was gone on vacation and we didn't have another member that had been appointed yet. So we will have one of those coming up here pretty soon. We have those on a quarterly basis. But we have internal controls in there so that people can check up on the work that I do, because we send everything that I do as far as statements when they come in the mail go to the finance department so that they can go ahead and reconcile those and make sure that we are staying above board with the things that we're doing and that we're following the rules and regulations that we have in our investment policy. Everything in that investment policy and everything in these internal controls is governed by a council called the Utah Money Management Council, the UMMC, and is headed up by the state treasurer. So they set the rules. They send that rule book out every quarter so that if there are any changes with theirs, we can also participate in those changes. They are also the ones who approve all of the brokers that we can possibly use as far as investing money. Now, if they have a background on that, we'll move on to some of the outside investing that we have done. I've got a spreadsheet titled Morton Capital Markets. If you look at that, this is the outside investing that we have right now. And right down at the very bottom, you can see we have $57,678,000 that we have invested with Morton Capital Markets. We started this investment program about 12 years ago, and over that time, we have built it to that. At the time that we invested this, we had about $12 million that we had in the PTIF, and we had another $12 million that we pulled and we put into this. So we have built it from that to this over that period of time, and it's through some wise investing, I hope, with some of the stuff that we've done. We found that when we first started this investment program that we were making somewhere in the neighborhood of 4 to 5 times the amount of money that we made through the PTIF. And that was the reason that we wanted to look very carefully at this program. Now, interest rates are not quite as good as what they have been. However, I will give you a little bright spot. Over the past couple of weeks, they have been going up. So you will see that the yield that we have is a little bit less than what we were getting a few years back, but we are still getting 3 to 4 times the amount that we would get through the PTIF as far as the investments that we have. This money is all available to us at any time that we want to get this money. So it's not as if it is locked away, even though we have set it up as what we call a ladder, so that we have maturities that are coming due every few months, and we will replace those if we don't need the money at that time. But if we do need the money in the city for a project or something of that nature, then we can pull that money and we can use it for that project. We have it divided into 2 accounts with Morton. Those 2 accounts are impact fees and non-impact fees. I didn't give you a spreadsheet, I don't believe, for the breakout, but you can certainly come and take a look at them in my office, or I can prepare one for you if you would like one. In our non-impact fees, we have $40,556,000 in that one. And in the impact fees, we have $17,122,000. And those 2 add up to the $57 million that we were talking about earlier. In addition to our outside investments with Morton, we also still have some money with PTIF. And the reason for that is the liquidity. And I know that the information that I've given you is a little bit dated on that because it was put together the first time that I was supposed to come to this meeting a couple of months ago. But I have some updated information that I pulled off today. And we have in PTIF somewhere in the neighborhood of about a little over $23 million in addition to the $57 million we have over here. So we're looking at an $80 million plus portfolio that we are making our investment and our interest on. The thing I would really like to stress to you, one of those, by the way, is Coral Canyon. That is restricted funds. We cannot use that for anything other than paying off the debt out at Coral Canyon. And there is $1.8 million that is in that PTIF account. One of the things that I would really like to stress with you is we built a ladder with this Morton capital market so that we have bonds that are coming due every so often. I have put together a spreadsheet that I hope you have that shows what our cash flow on that is, because it shows how many bonds we have that are maturing each of the next 5 years, which is as far out as we can take our investments, is a 5-year span that we have out there. So we've tried to match it up with where we saw our capital projects, with where we saw some of the expenditures we were going to have, so that those would come due as those were needed. And as you can see, we have $8 million that are coming due in 2022, and that moves on down the line. In 2023 has 14 million, and so on and so forth, all the way down to where we hit the $57 million at the bottom. And of course, in the PTIF, we still have that money that is available to us in case we need to get it a little bit quicker maybe than we do through the capital market that we have with Morton Capital. So you've got an information there that the grand, the grand total is about $25 million that we have total invested there at that particular time when this was prepared. One thing I would like to point out is through Morton, we are actually earning a 1.06% as far as our interest. Through the PTIF, it is at 0.36. So you can see the difference that we are getting as far as an investment. Even though that interest rate is not a great interest rate, we buy the best that we possibly can at the time that we need those. So you see some of those might be a little bit lower interest rate than what you might think, or lower than what the market is, but we do the best that we can with what we have that is available. Every time I talk with our broker, I say, I want a 5% bond and I want it to do this and I want it to do this. And he said, we all do, but there are none of them out there. So we can't buy those. As a matter of fact, I was on the phone with him an hour this afternoon for a bond that we have that is maturing on Monday, on the 28th. And we were looking for a replacement for that particular bond right there. This is a daily thing that I spend a lot of time on and watching the markets and seeing what's taking place in the market so that I can know what is best for the city to put their money into. But pointing out the Morton capital markets versus the PTIF right down here toward the bottom, if we were to have taken the $57 million that we have invested with Morton and left that in PTIF, with the current earnings that we got, it would be $208,505. If you look up just a little bit, the money that we are getting from Morton is $614,057. So we're still earning 3 times what we would earn through the PTIF. And hopefully, we're doing a good job for the city as far as the financial aspect of it goes. Any questions?
Carrie, we appreciate the report. We appreciate the efforts that you go into with that investment committee and the audit committee. And I know Councilman Coates and Councilman Martinson are both part of that committee, and look forward to having those quarterly meetings with you. Any questions for our department head here?
You know, Carrie, I got to know Marlo Oaks when he was running for state treasurer. The Republican Party voted him, and I was so impressed with him as a candidate. Do you have daily correspondence with the state treasurer, or is that something that's?
I don't have daily correspondence with them. I speak with them usually on about possibly a monthly or bi-monthly basis.
Well, I was hoping that you would advise him, because you do a great job, and we appreciate the.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. If any of you do have any questions that come up after you look through that, my office is just right over here. And if you'll
call in advance, your key won't work.
I'll be over.
If you just come knock on the door or come give me a call, because that's where all of the money is, so we keep it locked up. But if you'll just come knock on the door or give me a call ahead of time, well, we'll let you in, and you can come in and ask any questions that you have, or ask a review of anything, or get any information you have. I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to come and speak with you. This, according to the mayor and according to the city manager, is now going to become an annual report instead of a quarterly report to you. So it will be a quarterly report to the Investment and Audit Committee, but for the full council, it will be an annual report. So if you have any questions between now and the next time that we come in to report to you, you can come and visit me there as well.
And we'll try to get that on a January meeting like we intended to this year, but we appreciate you, Carrie. City Manager, did you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I would just say the reason we can have it as an annual, among other things, is Carrie does a wonderful job, conscientious with our money, exercises good controls over our funds, and we appreciate him. So if we don't get to say it for another year, we appreciate what you do.
Thank you.
Mayor, I was on the council when we first discussed the investment concept, and had we known what it would become, I think that it would have been a much easier decision. Then it was a cautious and careful decision, and Carrie was part of that, and it's amazing what it's accomplished.
And I appreciate what he said. First, we don't want to lose the funds, and second, while we hold those in trust before we spend them, and according to our budget, we're able to earn a little bit of interest on that. So well done. We'll move along to item 10B, which is Washington City Financial Quarterly Report, and that will be given by Finance Director Brian Brown.
All right, Mayor and Council. Unlike the investment committee, this is required by the state auditor that we do a quarterly financial report, so I can't get out of that. And so in your packet, the report that's probably 20 pages, that's produced out of our accounting software, Springbrook, where it lists all the revenue expenses. And so we give you that, and we list everything, and then I do the write-up, and then we provide some additional information on the quarterly report that might make it a little easier. So if there's other items you'd like to see or want to see something different, let us know, because we can always incorporate that as well. So to start off with revenue, as you look at the revenue, this graph lists all the revenue expenses for all the funds for 2020, fiscal year 2020 to 22. And this only includes July to December, so we're comparing comparable months. Now on this, these are all our funds down here, down at the bottom. And here, I abbreviated it, but capital, CP means capital projects. If I put that in there, it'd be humongous and we couldn't read it. So in the document I sent out, we talk about revenue. So sales tax continues, this year's continue on the same path it has in the prior year. And that's part of this growth right here that we see on sales tax on that green line in the general fund. Property tax, once again, at December 31st, we'd collected $3.1 million in property tax. We budgeted 3.4, and I went to check in January, because we usually get a little more into January, and we had collected another 464,000. So we'll be right at, for the year, 3.5 million for property tax. We may get a little more because there is some that still comes through. And the other part of this increase that we've seen this year in revenue is due to the golf course. Green fees are up this year, and also the community center. With the community center, we've seen more memberships. The membership revenue's up, and also daily sales and recreation. So that's what's caused that increase in the general fund revenue. When I looked at expenses, I'm like, why are expenses going down in general fund? And I realized, I quickly did a report, and I was like, oh, it's because of CARES Act. But well, last year we had the CARES funds, and we were trying to spend all the CARES funds. So that's why the expenses are lower this year in the general fund. And now, so you can see all the other funds, they're similar last year. The expenses are a little lower. And over here, we can see, this is why the power director came to us and said, we may need to increase my budget and this is due to the higher power cost and an increase in our load. You can see it right here in this graph. The last 2 years, this was flat, and this year it just jumped right up. So I thought that was interesting. So that's a summary of all the funds. In here, I put a graph for the building permits. Now we can blame Drew for this when he sits there and draws on the board and does all his little things. Our building permits this year are right on track with last year for this 6 months. So that's kind of where we're heading with the building. And I also include this with the RAP tax contributions. So this is a summary of all the RAP tax, so we can see what we collected, what we've dispersed. And then back in resolution R 2019-21, they allocated 35% or committed 35% to cultural facilities and arts. So I show you what that is, and then what the uncommitted balance is. So that's what the uncommitted balance is and what we have towards arts and cultural facilities and arts. Now, I know Kerry's talked about interest, and he mentioned in there that interest rates are down. And so once again, this shows all the funds and for the last 3 years, so you can kind of see what the interest rates have been doing. And like he said, they are down. That's the one downturn with this economy, is the interest rates are down, but all our other revenues are up. And so to move on to operating expenses, when I looked at operating expenses with the general fund, there were 2 accounts that were higher, and it was fleet. And so we need to do some cost allocations on that and look at the parts on that to make sure that we moved that from the fleet used to be its own fund, and we moved it back to the general fund. So we need to make sure those cost allocations are working right. Now the labor one, we will not make till the end of the year because we need to know the total labor hours. And then finance was higher, and that's due to because our audit was paid in that quarter in December. And so if there was some that were a little higher, but they were one-time expenses, so they'll balance out throughout the year. And then you can see all the departments. I break it up by operating versus non-operating expenses because it's easier to see. If you include that operating in it, it just really makes it looks funny. So, and the non-operating expenses, like I put down below, are the capital projects, capital equipment, depreciation, impact fees, and interest. And like I said in the report, with the general fund, I see no concerns with the expenses. Everything tends to be right in line, and with enterprise funds as well. So that's the summary of this quarter. And we'll schedule, once again, we do this every 3 months. So it seems like I was just here yesterday doing this. So it'll be tomorrow when I'm back. So do you have any questions regarding the quarterly update for July to December 21st?
Counsel, any questions for Brian?
You know, Mayor, I just think it's interesting after Rusty's report that when you look at these documents, you see that with sales tax, where we really haven't scratched real deep into our potential for sales tax, where we received 7.3 million last year, and with property tax and a population of around 31,000, we got less than half that with 3.1. So this is certainly something that I appreciate your report again. In considering inflation, I guess I would just like your input on this. So being a product of the 60s and 70s, we dealt with terrible inflation in the late 70s. And it was always a precursor for interest rates to be raised to help combat inflation. Is that something that you anticipate going forward, that that interest rates will be raised to combat inflation, or is that something that's even considered anymore?
So when I looked at this, because that's one thing I've been looking at is inflation, and so I read a bunch of articles, and that's one thing they are considering is about bumping the rates to slow the economy down. So we could see some interest rates increase. Now, how will that affect everything? It'll be interesting to see, because going through COVID and everything, they want to slow down the economy, but because it's really, interest rates are, like you said, everything I read was 40-year highs. So I predict we'll see some interest rates increase.
You know, I appreciate that perspective, but as a senior in high school, I remember with interest rates hovering around what I believe was like 12, 13%, a lot of our local contractors had to leave and go to Vegas for jobs because people couldn't afford to build. You know, and that's a concern to me, because that's a delicate balance in there. So, you know, I appreciate if you have any updated information on that going forward. I would really appreciate hearing it if you see any trends that are.
When I do this, I always look at inflation and what the feds and what the what's going out there, because to me that's interesting, because we want to kind of be on top of that so we can help, because the farther ahead of the game, if something were to happen, the better off we are, so we can make adjustments and start planning for it. So, and that's one, like I said, that's one thing I always check and see what I can find out about inflation. I probably should start doing it monthly with where we're at right now.
Thank you.
Good comments. Any further comments, questions for Brian?
I would say, you know, if you ever want to really learn about accounting, Brian's a great person to teach you. He is very, very knowledgeable and does a great job for the city. Since we're passing out kudos, he certainly deserves some, and we've worked him very hard this year. So he's put in a lot of extra time and effort that doesn't always get noticed. He's across the street in our annex building, but him and his department do a fantastic job.
Yeah, we have some great employees that really work hard, and they have the best interest in the city, and they want to see the city succeed. So
they're fantastic, and they even invited me to their 2-2-2-22 Taco Tuesday yesterday. So yesterday they were the favorite department.
And I plan that, and I usually don't plan parties.
Did you get my text? I texted you that date because I know how much you like those.
I'm like, I need to put your phone number in my.
You don't have me.
No, I was like, who is this? And I didn't want to reply back.
Oh my goodness, Brian.
And I'm like,
well, I appreciate everyone knows that the finance director doesn't have the mayor saved in his phone.
But it's my phone. So.
But I remember, I have you saved in my phone, and I remember how much you like dates and times that line up like that. So
see, my wife planned it for her elementary school, and so I'm like, I can't let them outdo us. So we planned one, and it actually was pretty fun. And like I said, we don't get together and do that, so it's fun. And that won't happen again for a while. So
we've had this conversation in your office. Thanks, Brian. I appreciate we all appreciate your work. Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll move on to item 11. This is a consideration to approve an amended annual meeting schedule. So I actually really appreciated the feedback from the council on this. We had a chance to discuss our meeting schedule at our workshop session last week. And we determined that we prefer to meet for our workshop and our regular meeting on the second and fourth Wednesdays of the month. So we'll start, starting on March 9th will be our next meeting, and we'll have our workshop session at 4 p.m. And we'll try to be done by 5:30 to have a break there, and then we'll start our regular meeting at 6 p.m. The Planning Commission is continuing to meet on the first and third Wednesdays, and they unanimously preferred to continue to meet at 6 p.m. And then the Power Board wants to stay where they are, which is the first Tuesdays of the month at 5 p.m. So I know we've already discussed this. I'd be happy to entertain any other comments or a motion.
Pardon, you mind if I make a comment before we?
Sure.
So I would just suggest and recommend that we're going to have our workshop and regular meeting on the 2nd and 4th. I would just like to suggest that when we have need to do a field trip or road trip, whatever you want to call it, that we can do that maybe earlier on the 1st and 3rd so that we can Wednesdays to get back in time for those that need to be at Planning Commission when the need arises.
So yeah, that's a good point, council member. On our meeting schedule, our 2022 meeting schedule, it does say any additional committee board meetings will be scheduled on an as needed basis. So I'm happy to accommodate that best I can for those.
So Mayor, if no other discussion, I'll make a motion that we amend the 2022 meeting schedule as outlined.
I have a motion by Coates.
Second.
Second by Martinson. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. How about that for government responsiveness? You can go back to your old schedule if you'd like to. And Councilmember Martinson will be there. Okay, we'll move on to item 12. We did not receive, this is item 12 is public hearings, and for the record, we did not receive any electronic public comment on this item. Item 12A, or on any of the public hearings, which is just one tonight. Item 12A is a public hearing and consideration to approve a height waiver request. It's HW-22-02 for a church building located at approximately 4251 South Medallion Drive. And this is a public hearing, but first, does staff have any need to present to this before? Drew, are you doing the staff report on this?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
I'll just keep them brief on this as we do for these. The applicant's requesting a waiver for the maximum height on buildings. The maximum allowable height as per the zoning regulations is 35 feet. The applicant is seeking approval to extend the height of their proposed new church with the associated steeple, and that is only the steeple area, to extend to 71 feet at its highest point. That's pretty common with all the churches in the area for the LDS church. And so this is just, I know this comes from the Wasatch area because I know those little mountains very well, and we're spending time going to school there. So that's not what it's going to look like in Washington, but that's what's before you tonight, is just to get that extra. Again, the building itself will be under 35 feet or close to it, and then the rest will just be in the steeple. So I'm glad to answer any questions council might have.
Any questions for Mr. Ellerman?
Only if I can make a joke.
There are some that I wouldn't earlier, but I trust you, Councilman.
No, I won't even say it. I better not.
Is it in a flight path? Is that where you're?
No, I was just going to say, what if we just think out of the box and don't do a steeple on this one? But I was just joking. I know that's their style, so I'm not trying to, but it was just kind of joking.
I thought it was going to be more about the grass, but we're hoping for a...
No, I assume they're putting in all that grass.
Tonight is just the height waiver, and I assume the applicant's here. Is there any need for you to come forward, or would you like to come forward?
I can if you like. I thought it was interesting. Got the agenda and saw the next item on there. My name's Anthony Meadows. I'm with PC Architects, and I'm here in place of Dennis Patton, who's the architect on the project. So the building will look essentially just like that. We'll try to select brick colors and roof colors that are complementary to the area. But it will be mainly brick. Some of the ones more recently had been stucco or incorporated a lot of stucco. As far as the grass, I had gotten some comments back from Eldon, and he politely requested that we drastically scale back the non-functional turf, which we have. We've got a conditional use we've got an application for a conditional use permit in. We'll be meeting on that next week. And with that, we've got a landscaping plan that we only have grass back by the pavilion. So no grass shown around the building at all.
Oh, this is great. We appreciate you bringing this forward, and I know Dennis Patton, so I knew that you weren't Dennis, but I thought you might be the representative. Any questions for the applicant, counsel? Okay, thank you. So this is a public hearing. Is anyone here that would like to come forward and speak to this item, which is a height waiver request for the steeple on the church? Okay, seeing no public comment, I'll close the public hearing, and I will call for further discussion and/or a motion on this item.
Mayor, not hearing any more suggestion. I have a motion if you're ready.
Please.
A motion to approve a height waiver request HW-22-02 for a church building located at 4251 South Medallion Drive. The steeple 71 feet. The rest of the building should be under 35 feet.
We have a motion by Ivy.
I'll second that.
Second by Henderson. This is, do we do a roll call vote on this?
Yeah.
We'll roll call vote. Casperson?
Aye.
Ivy?
Aye.
Coates?
Aye.
Henderson?
Aye.
Martinson?
Aye.
The height waiver passes unanimously. We'll move along to item 13, which is a review of some proposed ordinances. 13A is a review of the proposed landscape conservation ordinance. City Attorney Thad Segmiller.
Thank you, Mayor and council members. In preparing today, I went back and watched the YouTube video of when we started talking about the ordinance. I get to see myself up there. That's fun. Which was February 2nd. And so the goal on the landscape ordinance is just to finish discussion of the original proposal. But listening to the YouTube video, I noticed that I told you my first few sentences on February 2nd were, we're going to bring all new ordinances in work session meetings so we can work on them first. And here we are in a regular meeting. The concept today is the same. Review the proposals. We're not asking you to adopt anything today. This is intended to be a work type discussion on the new ordinances, and we can get them to where you want them or understand what you'd like to do with them. And so on the landscape ordinance, we left off, if you've got it pulled up there on your paperwork, we left off at section 8-8-4 2i. And so we had stopped at discussing outdoor and exterior pools. In the section 4 of water efficiency standards for non-residential zones. And we were going to start back up at landscape standards for non-residential zones. Is everybody with me where we're at that point?
Did you make changes to this since?
No.
Oh, you didn't? Okay. I
Yeah,
thought
so
there
this
was
is still
some-
the original. I wanted to get through it once before we start making any changes.
Okay.
One thing I thought about today as I was watching the YouTube video and just soaking in how much time has passed is once we're done getting through this, it might be good to revert to some of those sections in the previous part. If there's discussion or direction from the council, that would certainly be helpful. So I'll proceed at landscape standards. Again, this is for new construction, rehabilitated landscaping, new development, and new landscape improvements in all non-residential zones. So this is for all categories of non-residential development. See, grass is not permitted there in A1. Grass is prohibited in park strips that have the same characteristics of too narrow or too steep. Landscape installers shall follow the plans that have been reviewed. You may want to discuss A1. Grass is not permitted outside of an active recreation area. What that means is if you're a business or a industrial or commercial use that isn't incorporating an active recreation area, this ordinance would say your site shouldn't include any irrigated grass.
Mr. Sigmiller, so if an applicant came forward, then they would have to identify that prior.
Correct.
What if they're not exactly sure where they want it, but they know they want some?
If it's not an active recreation area, they
I mean,
don't.
it's an active recreation area, but they don't know exactly where.
We would ask them to give us the same type of plan, irrigation plan, landscape plan that we would require of residential. So they would need to be able to tell us where. And again, active recreation area is a defined term, which means an area that is dedicated to active play where grass may be used as the playing surface. Sports fields, play areas, or similar uses. And so if they want grass, they'll need to, one, identify it as active recreation area and know where it's going to be within their plan.
I guess more specifically, my question is, let's say that they qualify for 400 square feet. It's not just 400 square feet on their application. It's in this certain location.
So this is not, so the chart that shows square footage per lot size applies to residential. This is not residential. So in theory, they could qualify for 3 acres of irrigated grass, but it would need to be an active recreation area that's available for public use and recreation. And so I don't think we're anticipating the non-residential to come in with small square footages of grass. It'll either be a substantial active recreation area or none at all, unless you instruct us to do otherwise. Number 2, the installers need to follow the plans that have been reviewed and approved by the city. Number 3, each project shall propose and follow an approved planting plan. These are similar restrictions, or not really restrictions, but regulations as applied to the residential, which includes configuration of their plantings and their trees. Number 4, if secondary irrigation is available, we require that they connect to it. And so again, that's more of a hopeful future connection, but we want to contemplate that now because we're at least talking in generalities of how to do better with, not do better, but to develop and get better efficiency with our secondary water.
Are we requiring our commercials to have secondary pipes put in commercial zones?
I don't know.
Lester does. I just don't remember if that was a requirement in our commercial zones or not yet.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. It depends upon the area.
Can you state your name, Lester? We all know you, but.
Lester Dalton with Public Works. We do require it if we have per se a commercial subdivision that were to come in, but most of the time the commercial pods don't come in as subdivision proposals. So depending upon the layout, that's kind of how we've gone with that. Most of the time it's just a single individual site.
So if there is irrigation alongside it, then yes. If not,
right.
No.
Yeah, so commercial is a little bit of a different animal than a standard subdivision.
All right. Thanks, Lester.
Okay.
Any other questions on that section? So moving to the required documentation, again, this will look very similar to what you recall from residential. We require a landscape plan. We then have a fairly detailed list of just technical data, name of applicants, name of landscapers, planting plan, an irrigation plan, and again, we really set out a lot of the detail that we expect of commercial or the non-residential, a grading plan, and then we set out the plan review process in step 2. Again, this would all come as part of the building permit. There would be an application that need to be submitted, need to be completely submitted, and then the staff would review it. Their installers and designers need to meet state law and state licensing. During landscaping, they need to comply with any inspections or reviews required by the city. Prior to getting the occupancy permit, they would need the certificate of compliance issued by the city. And so that's the standard for landscape on non-residential. Any questions on all of that?
Yeah, I got a question on just the title. We just say landscaping standards. Are we? I'll admit I thought it was for all.
Yeah, that's just for that one category. So we essentially are a little more specific for non-residential. That when we turn the page, it'll be.
But so let me so item A, is for for construction non-residential zones. And then section B is required documents. So you're saying the required documents are required for residential and commercial?
Residential, in the residential section that we discussed on the second, residential is required to bring a landscape plan, an irrigation plan, a planting plan, and those same types of documents are listed in this section. So I'm saying yes, both of those types have the same expectation that they've planned and can present to the city their landscape plan, irrigation plan, and grading plan.
And the difference is one, like the residential, you don't have to hire a professional architect.
Yeah. So you'll see here on the non-residential, we have a lot of subsections of specific details that aren't listed in the residential. In theory, residential could be the owner or an owner, developer, owner, contractor. Yeah, we don't require that it be a licensed person. Did that answer your question, Councilman?
No, because we're still a little confused. So we're looking at, so going back to section 3, I'm just going to read the title.
Where section 3 of?
So I'm just going back a little bit because I'm trying to be consistent. So section 3 calls out water efficiency standards for single family and multiple family residential zones. And then it goes through all those items. Under landscape standards, you said that they're required to put in have a landscape plan and submit it to, but it's not saying that, which I'm fine with. I'm just saying that's not what you just said, unless I misunderstood you.
I did say that. So we still have more sections to look at.
Okay.
We're not done looking at the ordinance.
And then section 4 is non-residential. So then
Section
we're
4
going
is
through those,
non-residential.
and it requires that, required documentation.
And section 5 is landscape and irrigation plan for all.
Okay. All right.
We're not, I've read this like 5 times, and I'm just not seeing where residential, you've got to submit a plan. I must be missing something.
Okay.
I can see where it talks about that on commercial, but
Maybe it's fine because I'm not in favor of making a resident bring in a landscape plan with a licensed landscape architect. Commercial makes sense, but not residential to me.
I think I read it the same way, and I think we've put Council Sigmiller at a little bit of a disadvantage by spreading these out so far, and we all have to remember what they say when we come back, but that's the way I read it too, is that they would have to comply with the grass and the 2 water efficient trees and those type of things, but it doesn't require them to provide
that's
I
the
don't
way
think,
would read it.
I'm not finding the specific section that says they have to. I think to get staff approval, they're gonna need to provide staff something.
They're gonna have to show, even if
Right.
it's just
And so,
That
so whether it's a professional plan that they've had commissioned for a study for their site, I don't know, but they're gonna need to give staff something that shows their landscaping plan, their planting plan, their irrigation plan.
I agree. The thing I don't want to get to is that we're always talking about home affordability, and now we're telling them, hey, now you got to go hire a professional to do your landscaping. It's not a life safety thing. I'm a true believer that, I'm one. I went and did my own landscaping. I think people like to do their landscaping and work on it so they can. I just want them to be able to, if they have to, a hand sketch, or maybe they do a little finer detail with it, but not have to go hire a professional for a resident is all I'm saying. Commercial makes sense, but for a residential, it doesn't make sense to me to require a licensed professional. But if they want to provide a plan, they can do it in other means is all I'm saying.
So my memory is we had a lot of discussion on the plans in the definition section, and you'll see in there, the definitions for irrigation plan, landscape plan, they just say a plan that shows, and then it describes the detail that it's supposed to show. And would expect that residential, in addition to commercial, are going to have to submit something to staff so they can see the accurate identification and location and species of the trees, the accurate identification and location of the species of plants, the accurate identification and location of your valves and your irrigation lines, right? And nothing in here requires that residential have those professionally prepared.
In addition, you're going to have to show the amount of grass, whether you have a pool or not, those type of.
Yes, but you're correct. I'm not finding anything that says they have to submit a landscape plan for residential, but to get staff to review their application and approve it, the staff's going to need to know that information.
So Council Segmiller, when you mentioned that they would have to submit certain species, is it not enough just to say that if the plant or the shrub, the tree is considered drought tolerant? I hate to get too far into telling homeowners what they can do. You know, I mean,
So
it
I'm
seems to me if it's
imagining-
drought resistant, then it should work fine, no matter what it is.
I'm imagining you'd see a concept plan, a lot like you get for other things, and it shows a green circle and says approved tree from the tree list, right? So it would show a tree, but it doesn't say the exact species.
So they don't
of the
have to
tree.
list exactly. I
Yeah.
thought that you just said.
It could show plants that says approved species from the plant list. I think that's going to be sufficient for staff. If it said mulberry tree, I think staff might say, hey, that's not on the approved list, right? But I think all you really need to do to comply is say, you know, tree, approved species from the tree list. And that should satisfy staff review, and the same for plants. Grass is going to be looked at a little more specifically. Obviously, size and square footage will be measured and reviewed. But yeah, I don't think we're asking them to decide which color of crepe myrtle they're going to put in at the planting phase.
Is that drought resistant?
Yes, crepe myrtle does qualify, and they're beautiful flowering too.
So I had a question. What if people want to do fruit trees? Have we discussed a fruit tree option? Because I mean, those aren't drought resistant. Like they're going to take more water typically, but
So fruit trees actually like dry feet, but you're right, they're not drought resistant. They do okay. That's one reason why they grow in desert areas, is because they like hot, dry summers. This doesn't contemplate that residences are going to be planting fruit trees, and so we'd need to add that if we wanted to, or we could indicate that we would allow a certain amount of fruit tree. The reality is fruit trees do need more water than the desert adapted varieties that are going to be on the recommended list.
If we're going to consider fruit trees, could we also consider nut trees?
I think we should. And there are nut trees like pecan, and pecan's a very well adapted one to desert conditions. It's got a long taproot and it does excellent with very little water. Others like almond or pistachio need more water, but those also do well here. And so
we restrict the size of grass, and then we say each single family dwelling shall have a minimum of 2 water efficient shade trees and a minimum size, but I think we allow for more trees than that, but not more grass. So I think they can really have trees based on this ordinance, but they have to have at least 2 water efficient shade trees.
So if we look at chapter 5, which is the next section of review, there's a tree selection section. I'm making notes right there. I think we could provide additional section in there that mentions other trees that aren't on the list, such as fruit or nut trees. My guess is this council would support that option being available to landowners. The thought that I'm weighing is, do we treat it as additional consumptive water use, or do we just make an allowance that we say, you know what, residences can plant, you know, trees and fruit trees and nut trees as approved by staff review or something like that. Any thoughts from the council on how you want me to craft that?
my opinion is that they should be able to do fruit trees if they want. I mean, it's not that many. I think it's far in between when people are going to want to do those. So we should let those people do it when they want on a fruit tree. But that's just my feeling, and I'm getting a lot of head nods. So I think everyone's that it's not enough to make an effect on the overall consumption. And if they're doing those, they're not doing the other trees. And
so you're okay if the fruit tree is replacing the what the ordinance calls a drought tolerant tree, or do you want that to be in addition?
So correct me if I'm wrong or jump in anywhere. I envision that you're going to want your shade trees. You say a minimum 2 shade trees, so you're going to throw those somewhere around your yard. And then if you have room on your yard to put in a fruit tree, you're going to put in additional fruit trees is how I looked at it.
That's how I look at it too. I think we're trying to promote trees, not kind of restrict them, right?
What if your yard isn't big enough for more than 2 trees? Can you put 2 fruit trees in if you want to? I mean, I'd like to not restrict,
Yeah.
I mean, if I have a small yard, I'd like to allow them to get whatever trees they want to, unless it's like classified as a nuisance tree of some kind, but I'm not really into the idea of saying, hey, nope, you can't have a fruit tree, you got to have shade trees,
So I've got notes here. I'm going to add language that allows fruit and nut trees, both in addition to or in replacement of the requirements in the ordinance. I think that would at least leave the flexibility that Councilman Coates has mentioned, and I think it would further our goals of promoting trees.
So what about, since we're on trees, when you jump back to the size, I understand when we talked last time, we talked about, I just said, hey, what if we can't find 1.5 inches? And our goal was, hey, we just don't want them throwing in some junky twig. But I think 1.5 inches is even hard to find right now.
Yeah, and Councilman Martinson had also mentioned that, and I didn't take much to get me to go down to the nursery and walk around. I was thinking maybe we put just a pot size, like no less than a 5-gallon pot size or something. That seems to be more what the industry looks at anyhow, if the council's okay with that. You can go in there and measure take a caliper reader and measure, but really there's nobody at Star Nursery that's going to tell you, yeah, that tree is caliper blank until you measure it. And so I was just thinking, base it on pot size if you're okay with that, and then ask what pot size you would like the limitation to be.
I am okay with that, but I just want one little consideration, and that is, if you buy a 1-gallon tray, it's probably $20-$30. I would hate to just be cost prohibitive from a young family, say, that would like to landscape. And, a lot of us, we can afford any tree we want, but I think we have to be aware of those that we can't. So I just don't want to prohibit someone's ability to landscape their yard. I mean, it's tough. We're trying to do something very hard here, and that's conserve water. We understand that. But I think we have to consider also that if there's a family that wants to put trees in and all they can afford is the $20 tree at Walmart, then they should, I just want to see how the council feels about consideration of that, I guess.
That's a really good point. And a lot of, the crepe myrtles, the fruit trees, they start in 1-gallon pots. They're coming from bare roots that got rooted that fall in a nursery, and the industry does a pretty good job of making those show up alive and survive if they're properly planted and maintained. And so 1 gallon might be all you need.
Okay.
We just put it at no less than a 1-gallon
Yeah, I
pot
agree
size.
with that. I've got 3 gigantic trees in my yard that started at 1 gallon because I couldn't afford, the big trees back then. And so I bought them at Star Nursery and they were that big. And now all 3 of them are huge. So I agree,
I'll just add that there are studies that show that the 1-gallon trees produce fruit and accomplish the same size as the 5 and 15-gallon trees on the same time frame. And so they seem to have a vigor of getting in early and often, and so the industry doesn't think they grow any less slow. Okay, so I'm at the top of Chapter 5, Landscape and Irrigation Design Standards for all new development, rehabilitated landscaping, new construction, and new landscape improvements in any zone. So these are general concepts that apply to any area. Because of that, you'll see that the language is more general, right? So plant selection shall be well suited to the microclimate and soil conditions at the site. Native, locally adaptable, environmentally sustainable plants are acceptable. We then refer folks to the Washington County Water Conservancy District's recommended plant list. We don't require that it come to that, but we recommend. The last sentence, plants with similar needs shall be grouped together as much as possible into hydro zones for efficient irrigation. That's a irrigation hydrology concept that we're trying to encourage. And then invasive plant species, as identified by the city, shall not be planted. So the city will need to come up with an invasive list. Those exist already. I know some of the nurseries have promulgated those. St. George has. the Shade Tree Committee has. And so we would just need to formally create basically a banned plant list. You'll see there areas with slopes 15% or greater shall only have deep rooting, water conserving plants, not grass. Park strips shall not be grassed. We then get into tree selection, and you'll see there again, it's very general about growth characteristics, site condition. We're looking for broad canopy trees. Anyway, just a lot of general and just details about the type of tree and the type of condition they could be planted or grown in. Really guidance parameters there as to what to put where. Then we move into pressure regulation, design standards. Again, this is mostly going to irrigation that's using drip emitters so that they properly emit and control the amount of water used. And so we want a pressure regulation control system. We want an irrigation controller that's water sense labeled so that it's smart. That means that it's got the ability to observe data such as it rained yesterday, so we won't turn on our sprinklers today. And so some of that data flows to it from some information system that I don't know, but I do know that those have that ability. Having the valves there in section C, valves irrigate similar sites and locations and solutions so that you can really tailor the nozzles or the emitters to the situation at hand. Just a lot of general, really good practice type recommendations here. You'll see down at letter K, landscaping with potable water is prohibited from 10 a.m. to 8 p.m. from June to September. That's one that I would want the council to be comfortable with, because that would be an area that I know gets a lot of publicity out there on the waves, but also an area that the city might end up feeling like they need to do a little bit of observation and reminder on. Letter L, waste of water is prohibited, and this section reads that if you do become a serial waster, the city can choose to prosecute you for that. You'll see in the last few sentences of that, nobody should be prosecuted until after the public officials attempted to obtain voluntary compliance and given them 14 days to come into compliance. So we kind of built a grace period into there, which I think was similar to what I would hope our city would do, but we make it so that you can be prosecuted, but also write it so that the city goes out and talks with people and helps them obtain compliance voluntarily. And then we have a recommendation on watering times, which is from the district. Some folks really like to get this type of guidance, and so again, general guidance as to how to set your irrigation during the various seasons. Any questions on that last section?
How do we do a better job of promoting this? I know that the district tries and tries. It's hard to get people to, just the little information that we have of the watering days and then the repeat cycles. I think that's a key aspect to all of it. And it's funny because you'll see one neighbor that just doesn't care, and then other neighbors that care a lot. And I don't want to go down the road where you're sitting tattletale on your neighbors, but we're also in a pretty big drought. So I'm just wondering what we can do to help promote these areas.
I agree with you. I think a lot of people, even though they have nice yards and landscaping that uses water, probably don't know the nitty-gritty details to those type of technicalities. And they probably don't recognize that if your sprinklers are still running every 2 days in November, you're paying for water you don't need to pay for, right? And so I agree that better and more information on those type of details will help us.
The Conservancy District is aware of this as well, and they're becoming a better and better resources just on the education aspect of it. So you'll start seeing them like with the banner and with the cards and things. They're more and more pushing things to the cities and asking us to disseminate, from our communication network. And so I think our IT guys will help us do that. And just it takes a little bit of time, but I agree it's important for just the awareness and the understanding of how and when to irrigate.
Yeah.
Another thing is, it kind of depends on what kind of soil you have on your lot too. If you have your grass on below sand and you deep irrigate twice a week, your grass will be dead. But if you have if your lot is some clay type soil, then that's more conducive to deep irrigation, a couple times a week. So anyway, there's so many factors, if you're got grass on below sand, it's probably okay to, water every day for a very short amount of time, and your actual watering's not going to be any more than somebody that's deep watering on a different soil twice a week. So,
So, Ms. Counsel Segmiller, my comment is, I do realize there's a lot of consensus language regarding the best way to monitor water use is to charge people for it. I understand that. The league has had extensive conversations about that, but I still am of the mind that education of our citizens, they all understand there's a water shortage. They're very responsive, very responsible. And I definitely would want to take that route. I understand that we may have to fine, but I'm glad that you said what you did, that we give people a warning and be able to work with them rather than threaten or fine right off the gate. I think that it's good to educate, and I think everyone's picking up speed in this and understanding. And I haven't come across one person that said it's a bunch of hooey, we have enough water, it's just a ploy or whatever. That's just not the case. So.
Yeah, and to just follow up on your comments, one of the things I got to experience was meeting with a lot of the technical staff around the county from the different cities, and they want meters so they can help find leaks and fix them sooner, not so they can find somebody, right? The motivation here is not a new code violation that can be fined and prosecuted. The motivation is how to conserve water, how to find the weak points better and address them quicker. And so I think that would be the total direction of the city and the city staff with this is, let's just help new development or rehabilitated development be built in a way that it is conserving from the outset if it can be, and then have the tools necessary to identify when there's a problem that can be fixed. If you will, I'd like to go back to the first section and some of those points that I would like the council to give us some particular guidance on. I'll start in the definitions, the rehabilitated landscaping. Remember, we put in a 50% threshold as what is and isn't. Does the council have any guidance for what you want that threshold to read as? I don't have any defense for that number other than it's just the middle ground placeholder that we put in there when it was being drafted.
I think it should be more. I think people should have a right to redevelop their landscaping. I'd feel more comfortable at a higher one, but you're an existing use, you're already here. If you decide to change something, I see it as you're gonna have to, if you're at that point, you're tearing up your whole backyard. So if you're tearing up your whole backyard, so maybe it's 60% or something like that, or 65, not 50, because.
So this is removal and replace. So it'd be a percentage of whatever they're removing and replacing. So if they're removing the front yard, and that equates to 50% or more, then it would need to comply. But if the front yard was being redone and it was only 40% of their total landscaping, then it wouldn't. And so what number would you like to have be in there when this comes back?
So can I ask a question?
Mm-hmm.
So currently, like if I go redo my whole yard, I don't need to get a building permit for that.
Correct.
So where does this put us? So, if we are gonna regulate redos, if I decide to redo my whole yard, do I need to come in and get a building permit, landscaping building permit, or how are we going to work that?
So we don't currently have any staff or regime for landscaping review other than just the typical building process. And so I think that this, to really police this proactively, we would need to build something. My perception is the city doesn't want to build that. They want to have it be codified. When people come in and say, I'm going to do a remodel, we want staff to tell them, yeah, well, if you're going to remodel, you need to comply with this if you hit the percentage. But mostly then let people
Be their own,
Themselves
govern
out there.
themselves. Okay, that's kind of where I'm at, is governing yourselves.
So why are we putting a percentage then? Like
Because
we don't wanna
staff are gonna have conversations with these folks, and they're gonna need a detail.
I don't know.
But you're right, we can take it out entirely if we don't intend to, build any structure to enforce it also. I think there's good arguments both ways.
I don't like having laws if we're not gonna, what's the point of having them if we can't enforce them?
Like, I think we'd intend to enforce them. If we don't do that, then Councilman Ivy's right. The only other mechanism we have would be rate increases on current building. If you don't put any number, people could go in and redo a yard and put anything they want. So you could build it to our standards to start with, come in a year later, tear it all out, put all lawn in.
But I see that I truly see that as, you're gonna get some people that are gonna be vindictive like that, yes. But
But we want to have a mechanism to not allow that. We don't want it to be a loophole you drive through. You just say, look, I'm going to do whatever today, and next week I'm going to come in and redo it, and there's no.
But how are you gonna?
No
So
mechanism.
the people that are gonna go to that level are gonna do it anyways.
Yeah, but it's okay to do if you don't put any restriction to it, right? So that it's fine. We're allowing it. It's.
Well, why
I
can't
understand
we
what
just,
you're
why
saying,
can't we
but-
say it based on new residents per this date? Right? So you have a date of, if your house was built in 2022 and moving forward, you redo it, it's 50% or 60%. But all the old stuff, it is what it is.
So we expect that most of the redos are gonna be rebate programs through the water district, which will require that they comply with this anyway. But yeah,
I'm just saying, like, I just don't like, I hate stuff on the books that there's no way we're going to be able to enforce it. I mean, we have a hard enough time keeping up with just our buildings of our houses, let alone now our inspectors have to go inspect their landscaping. And
so the next two ordinances I'm gonna talk about are exactly this, that you've got noise ordinances that don't have any enforcement provisions, so we're gonna talk about one. You've got a street public tree ordinance that doesn't have any enforcement provision, so you're right.
So I don't know that there's no enforcement provision. So think about a building permit. If somebody's building a new home, that's fairly simple. If they were going to, repair their basement or tear out walls or do things, some people come and produce the permit and some don't. But there are things down the road when people go to sell the house or to have it appraised where they are either in compliance with the standards or they're not. And so we're not always out there looking at people's backyards or looking in their basement to see if they're finishing their basement without a permit. But often it comes back at some future time that it was an unpermitted use. And I guess that would be my argument, is that it's better to make it that way and ask people to comply, even if we don't intend to be in their backyards, than just allow them non-compliance and we don't get what we want.
you bring up an interesting point, because I never thought of it like that, where you bring up that when they go to sell their home, they're now going to say, are you in code? And I would agree with you on building. You have to get your building up to code. It's life safety, not on landscaping. So that's where I have the struggle. If we're talking life safety, I agree.
Can I ask you, Mayor, what your experience with the Water Conservancy District, where you're on the board, what are they considering with this rehabilitative landscaping? Are we missing something?
So that hasn't been a conversation that I've had with there. I have had the conversation here. I appreciate this dialogue. I can tell you just personally from me over the process of the last few years, what I've felt like were strict standards don't seem as strict as I understand the water situation now. So I'm moving towards, conservation at every measure. And I think this council is having great discussion and doing similarly, but I don't have a strong opinion on this other than what you discussed and what staff says.
I think an interesting analogy, if you take a house that was built, in the 70s and nothing surrounded it, and eventually it's surrounded by all commercial, and it's been general plan commercial, so it's now become a non-conforming use. It's residential in the commercial zone. We're okay with that house continuing to be residential as long as it wants to be. Law and just good practice don't allow us to go after them. But the minute they come in with a land use application, we tell them, look, your land use application needs to conform with the nature of the zone. And so I think the underlying concept of rehabilitated landscaping is that if you're going to do a big project that's changing the nature of your yard, we want to ask you to conform to the same standards that are being applied to new development.
And I know this was mentioned earlier, but what in reality are we thinking would be someone's motivation? Wouldn't it be to receive the incentives from the Conservancy District?
So I see a lot of people doing it just because citizens are aware of the drought. They want to have they want to lower their utility bill, so they're doing it out of their own pocket. When citizens become aware of the program that's going to be a rebate program, which is just a turf, what are they calling it? A turf rebate? The turf
buyback.
Turf buyback, which is essentially the water district will give you a check on a calculation of how many square feet of turf you take out of your yard. And you can use that check to buy your new plants, to buy your new ground cover, whatever you want to do, right? It's just a cash rebate program to reduce the amount of grass. My concern is if that's too successful and we take out too much grass, there's negative side effects to not having some grass, right? And that's part of why we're passing this ordinance, is we want there to be some grass.
I would say there's a delicate balance there that we need to find. And I'm just wondering where we got the 50%, if that's done by experts that studied it, or is it just kind of a meet in the middle kind of a thing?
Just your attorney writing it and saying, where should I put? And I put right in the middle. And so, yeah, there's no science behind 50% there.
So I'm trying to think of all of up in my neighborhood, all of the people that have redone their yards in the last 10 years. Not a single one of them has put more grass in. They've all gotten rid of grass. And so.
But my concern, so I'm just going to say this, is that I agree with you. Most people won't tear out their yards and start over, but what I don't want to happen is they're like, oh, I want to do this. And then what if they have an existing yard and they're at 51%, and now they're required to rip out more grass than they want to? That's my concern.
I agree with your concern.
I think the other possibility is the house that has 99% cinder gravel landscaping with a Joshua tree. Somebody buys it and says, hey, we want to take that out. It's pretty 1987, and they want to plant some stuff. So they're actually maybe going from, again, the type of landscaping we don't want to promote. We don't want 99% just crushed rock, ground cover, and one cactus in these yards. I don't know what the perfect answer is. I think a number higher than 50% is easy to put in there, and I think that within a couple of years of experience, we might have better learning and better experience as to where we think that should be for our city. Or we can just remove rehabilitated landscaping or rehabilitated projects entirely and not have this govern them. So it'd just be new.
Well, my interests are that I just don't want it to be prohibitive. I think that, again, homeowners should have that right to make that decision. So
again, we're not forcing them to rehabilitate.
Right.
Yeah, this is when they choose to rehabilitate. If it's more than the percentage that this council sets, then they need to comply with the new standards.
I think you're correct that most people want to comply. They recognize the drought situation. They would go less, but I'd hate to have no number in there. But if you want to set that number quite high, I think that would be.
Can I ask a question? Do we know what the Conservancy District is doing? I know there's been some talk about, if a household goes over, 36,000 gallons in a month, that the rate will increase, per 1,000 gallons. Do we know where they're at on that, Mayor?
So I haven't heard specifics, but that is something that is on their mind, and that's going to be a conversation that's forthcoming.
The rates are set at our city, so we set the rates here, but our rates reflect
right.
The
it would
rates
be the
that they charge
wholesale,
us.
essentially the wholesale water rate.
And so they'll structure our rate so that it basically motivates that. We already know that they're increasing our rates $1 per year for the next 7 more, right? And so their management policy is to make water more expensive. It's not increasing $1 per year because it costs them more money to pipe it to us the next 7 years. It's a policy rate change. They've given several presentations about tier structures, which are basically the more you use, the more you pay. They haven't imposed those yet, but I think that If we don't have any solutions for new water availability and we don't have any solutions for conservation, I think that those are about the only scenario you end up with.
So I guess, I'm okay with, I'm kind of with these guys. It doesn't sit well with me to tell somebody what they can do with their yard, but I understand that we're in a serious situation with our drought, and I have no problem with, some new regulations on new construction. So, I'm okay with I agree with Manager Red that we probably need to put some kind of a
What if we put it
number in there?
75%? So basically it's pretty clearly an almost entire redo, right? So that it's
I mean,
enough that it's not close to 50-50. Because again, a 50-50, you might just be redoing your front yard, and somebody at the city could disagree that it's 55, right? So if you put it high enough that it is clearly a redo of your whole yard.
Yeah, I'd be a little more comfortable with that.
Me as well.
75, Councilman Coates, is that where you want it?
Yes. Forget Tara can't see my thumbs up.
And I think that's right. We really don't expect that these are going to be a high percentage of our conservation growth anyway.
I think most people on redos are getting rid of their grass. So
Yeah. I'll take you to the next page, 8-8-31. This is the standards for the hot water recirculation. Remember that we had drafted in a 1,000 square feet or greater, so that if it's smaller than that, you don't have to recirculate, or a system efficiency of 0.6 gallons per second. I had marked here that we were going to kind of talk about this some more and get some better clarity for what this council wanted.
Was that the standard did you come up with that number, or was it some data that we got from someone else?
Those were the numbers that came from the work group. Some cities are just saying you have to install research. They're not giving you outs. And so these two outs are basically kind of the middle ground, trying to not require everybody to install a recirc. And the way you get out of it is saying, look, we're so small that we don't have enough piping to even benefit from a recirc, or we designed it so well that a recirc, again, doesn't accomplish anything more than what we're already accomplishing. I think that we can adjust the gallons the gallons of system water per metric and decide, maybe we think it should be higher or lower. I also think you can increase the square footage, decrease it, or just remove that altogether. But those two were just meant to address, again, probably not very numerous exceptions, but situations that could possibly be exceptionary.
So my concern, I put recirc pumps in most of the houses I do, except for the really small ones. They're about $750 a piece. I mean, to me, they're essential for a house, but it's kind of a balancing act, because affordable housing is an issue as well. And I'm kind of adding up costs here, just for affordable housing. So I agree with the the recirc pump. The 1,000 square feet or greater. I mean, I may or may not be okay with that. What do you guys think?
So I look at it as, if you think about an apartment's probably not going to have one, right?
Right.
But a townhome, it's going to be on the smaller end townhomes. You're not going to be required, but the upper end, they're usually between, I've seen them as low as 900, 800, 850, 900 square feet up to 1,300 to 1,700 square feet townhome. So I actually think it's a good number based on that. If we have a smaller townhome that's a smaller square footage, that they're not required to.
Yeah.
And it makes sense because the water will get there faster.
Yeah.
So my concern would be, the smallest dwelling I've ever built other than an accessory dwelling unit was 1,100 square foot. I built an 1,100 square foot house here in Washington years ago. Most of the even townhomes now are 1,400 square feet. And generally on the townhomes, the you know, the water heater is somewhat centrally located. And so the 1,000 square feet for me, you know, we'd be putting these recirc pumps on basically the smallest townhomes that generally wouldn't ever put one on. You know, it'd be an extra cost for a project like that. So that would be my only hesitation here, is 1,000, maybe a little bit low.
Would you be
but-
more comfortable with around 1,500? I'm just, because I could see a lot of townhomes not being put on, wouldn't be required to.
Yeah.
The other thought is you could increase the gallons of system water loss to a little higher, and then that would motivate those
Yeah.
developers to, bathrooms and, washrooms are more centrally piped and located.
Yeah, so
there's just
the
a
water heater kind of needs to be in a
quicker loop. Yeah.
central, yeah.
You know what they're
yeah.
gonna do though? The cost to figure that out is gonna be more money than the water pump, so they're gonna do it anyways.
So, yeah,
Install the
maybe you're
pump to
right.
install the
I
pump
mean,
to
I'm
save
okay
money.
with this. Those are just some of my thoughts, you know. So.
But Councilman, I think your concerns are well noted. I mean, I sat with some individuals the other day at a ball game that were talking about their solar that they put on their house. And they all agreed that they'd probably never recoup the outlay for that, but they were trying to do their part to,
Yeah.
but again, there's a lot of, there's kind of a balancing act,
It
that
is,
we
yeah.
we definitely want to conserve water, but we don't want to price, potential homeowners out. But I like your comments. I think that's something that we need to.
And I'm just not
consider, yeah.
You know. So.
Well, can you talk about, because I think there was some conversation at the Water Conservancy District where someone was concerned about having to replace those pumps. And then I was reading that there's one of the downside could be like the electricity costs for it. I don't know if you guys have
So
had
that
experience with that.
that came from
Ivans and Santa
Ivans.
Clara.
It was Santa Clara. It was the Santa Clara
So
council.
member Shakespeare is a developer, and he thinks that they're a waste of money. They're inefficient. They break, and people just work around them within a year or two anyway. And then we've got Ivans with Mayor Hart, who's a developer, and he thinks they're the only thing that should ever be allowed, ever. And so we've got two elected folks that are both in development that have totally disparate opinions on it. And so I don't know.
My experience with them has been, if those are going to fail, they usually fail within a month or two, and we replace them, and then they're usually good for.
How do you know?
I don't know how.
How do you
long.
know when they fail?
They just
Water
don't work.
Your water takes longer
forever.
to get there. So
Yeah, they just don't work.
So let me share just a really brief story. So my son was welding and tripped a breaker, and I went into my shower, and I usually turn it on, let it run for like a minute. And I jump in, and boy, it was freezing cold. I thought, what the heck's going on? My water heater's going out. But what had happened is he had tripped the breaker that little recirc pump was on. And so I thought, I'm going to waste some water here and do a test. And I went back, and for my house, it's on the opposite end. I'm 3,200 square foot house, single story. And I was amazed how long it took to get there. I really was. I just thought, so they do run, Councilwoman, they do run constantly. It's a little recirc pump. It's a little teeny. I can't even imagine how small the motor is, but it just keeps that water flowing all the time to circulate it through. And I don't know what the electrical cost would be. I have no idea even how to calculate it. I think it'd be minimal, but I was certainly glad that it wasn't a water heater. I got my breaker back on, and we were in good shape.
So is there a size at which we would say affordable homes are usually this size or smaller? I think when we're getting to Councilmember Ivy's size, it's probably not as much of a concern. Or can we say that we encourage them, but they're required for this size footprint and larger?
Well, what if we did it based on the unit instead of the size of home? We're saying townhomes are not required, but recommended, but any single family home.
Most of the townhomes coming online are luxury townhomes.
No, not all of them, because that's all that there is townhomes. They might cost way more than we ever paid for our homes, but it's just how the market we're in right now. So, I mean, they're all nice, but I see what you're saying.
My one thought is we could, instead of looking at square footage, we could talk about bedrooms and, utility type rooms, right?
Well, Councilman Ivy brought up a good point of, I mean, same thing at my house. My water heater is on the opposite side of my bedroom, so it has to all the way across, right? So, and I have a water heater too. But on a townhome, you brought up, they're centrally located. The water gets to it fast. It's all right there, so it's just not that big of a deal.
Yeah.
It's not as much line loss as before. I shouldn't say it's not a big deal because it is, but it's just not as much. So those are good points to think about. That's why I thought on a townhome, maybe it's not a concern we need to stress about as much as a single family home.
So the old homes that didn't have garages put their water heater in a little closet right next to the kitchen or laundry room. So they were way more efficient back then. Now we have these garages where it makes a lot of sense to have your hot water heater out of the house for, leakage and concerns. But there's no question that the time to get the hot water to the faucets increased with modern layout and design.
So let me just add on to your comments, Councilman. Not only that, but these townhomes, a lot of times when you start considering that affordable housing component, a lot of those townhomes are exactly what those are. And yeah, every little bit of money does add up. So that even on that next level, that seems to make sense to me.
I think I'd be more comfortable at 1,400 square feet. That's where I would be,
Okay.
But, I mean,
Council members, you all right with it coming back with that? Okay.
That's a
And
good
then leave it at
balance.
0.6 gallons if they're going to get it on the efficiency.
yeah, and I like that too. Yeah, because there may be some builders that say, hey, we're going to design our house, even though it's a 2,500 square foot house, with the water heater in a location that meets that standard. So, that's okay too.
Yeah. And I think that based on all of our estimation of the housing market, we would probably like to see a builder that's talking about 1,400 square foot houses.
Yes, we would.
Okay, I'll switch to the next page. This is the total grass area chart that we started with. St. George is essentially waiting on their ordinance until after the legislature's done, so they find out what laws the legislature's passed and how they influence this. We want to get something, we want to keep moving on this. We don't want to wait on it. And so I guess my question is, where is the council's mind on this chart? St. George, I think, is still at the position of we'll just cut it off at 750 per any residential, but that position might change depending on how the legislature wraps up.
So I like that we have a scale. I like that we have options, but I'll admit I'd like to get some examples.
You'd ask for 10 examples of different houses.
Yeah.
We'll bring that to you.
Just so we can say, hey, this is 10 random houses. This is how many square feet of grass, just so we can get a bearing. And then, I mean, the numbers might go down. Like it might be like, oh, maybe our 2,000 square feet's too big for 20, half acre. But
Yep.
So that's just my thought.
Okay.
What did we decide this room was, Eldon? 2,600 square feet? Is that right? So it's a lot of grass to mow.
So we'll leave that chart. We'll just plan to work on it when we bring it back to you the next time. The next page on the car washes, we talked about the total gallons per car washed in the car wash. We have it at 20. I have that marked as another one for council. Just follow up on what we bring to you. Are we okay with 20?
Can I just jump in? And I think you may have received an email also from the Dino Dash owner, but he stopped in my office the other day, and it was interesting in conversation with him. He says that on a single wash, new water, they are at 7 gallons. He said they're able to do it at 7 gallons on a new wash, and
Is that new
so I
consumption?
said that, yes, new water. They have They have a recycle system in there, but I'm not sure if you got those emails or not. If not, I can forward you the document that he gave to me. But I was really impressed with that. He is an old home with the owner has a large amount of grass, and he was joking. He says, I might use less new water on my car wash than I do in my residential yard. But I think that I share this because I think it's a good conversation starter to say, here's what a conscientious car wash owner can do. He's got it down to 7 gallons of new water per wash.
So Thad, what's the consideration for self wash? Is there a consideration for a new car wash that would be self-serve?
So this right now does not distinguish between the type of car wash. It just says if it's a new car wash, then it must recirculate, and then it gives a minimum gallonage per wash. My understanding is the self-serve traditionally are known to use less water because of the nature.
You have to put a quarter in every
You've got to put a
minute?
quarter in, you've got to pull the trigger, you've got to wait till your forearm gets tired, right? All of those things. And so my understanding is the studies say that self-serve is less consumptive, but this basically says all types of car washes must recirculate and must consume no more than 20 new gallons.
So
per
you're
car wash.
comfortable with the self-serve fitting well into this?
I don't know about recirculate. What I see them wash off cars, but I don't know anything about how these car washes recirculate. I don't know how they catch it, how they sift it and do that, but I know that the industry has accomplished that, has fixed that problem in other cities that have already imposed restrictions like this, and so I trust that they'll be able to do it here too.
So quick Google search says self-serve car washes use 17 to 18 gallons of water per car. Car wash at home uses about 100.
It's because you spray the kids on the front lawn, right?
Exactly, or you just leave it running because you don't have a.
Yeah,
Is that data from car washes?
of course it is, yeah.
It's actually from the Water Conservation in for the Western United States.
Okay.
The car washes would have it different. They would say they use less.
Yeah, they'll use 8 to 10. on the
So,
self-serve.
Mayor, I appreciate you bringing that to our attention, that email, because I didn't get that. And that was one of my concerns that I had noted. You know, did we get any input from the car wash guys on what's realistic? So that alleviates my concern right there. So I think 20 gallons is reasonable.
So this 20 gallons is also what the county work group had come to. The technical committee had talked with car washes and done some follow-up on that. And so that's kind of where it was. I know some cities want to go less.
Is there a provision if, say, their machines go down?
So St. George has got some feelings where they approved car washes with all sorts of conservation type plans that then just got removed or shut down because they were clogging. There was no ordinance to enforce against them. It was just kind of a, hey, yeah, we'll do our best when we build this. And so this would be the provision that if the recirculation goes down, they either need to shut down or figure out how to use less than 20 gallons of new water per car wash until they get that figured out.
So we'd have to have people go out and check them every so often or something.
Yeah,
Like
and
every year or something, or
again,
how
that's not an employee that we currently have.
Yeah.
But that's a metric that I think it's kind of a technical metric that is capable. That there is capacity to do that. We are able to show up and check their nozzles and the flow rate of their nozzles and check their recirc systems and how it works.
We could hire that out. I'm sure with this new stuff coming down, businesses will pop up that's what they do is go check those kind of businesses for the cities.
And I don't know how many new car washes we're going to have either, right? That's the other question is, what's our experience going to be with new car washes? I would anticipate we're going to have at least one, right? I would anticipate we're going to have some, but I don't know how many. But this would really only apply to the however many new car washes you do get. And so, yeah, if it's 3, we'll just hire an expert in the field to schedule a yearly
We
inspection.
may be able to handle that through business licensing or different things to cover the cost of that inspection.
So considering the honor system, for whatever that means to individuals, could it be built into where the proprietor would be responsible to submit reports after they review and inspect and audit their own system? And then we just look at the paperwork and review that. Is that something?
So what Manager Red just said is we could just say as part of your business license renewal, submit your reports. He didn't mention reports, but he mentioned, at business licensing. So yeah, we could just ask them to submit it.
As long as it's a third party and not them.
Yeah, I think that the car wash industry recognizes that they've become a target of the lobby that's kind of anti-water use, and so I think they're highly motivated to also become compliant and to change with the times. And so I think we'll find that interaction with the car washes will be a positive thing. They'll recognize that what we're doing helps them with their perception from the public as well.
And I think we should actually have a positive attitude towards car washes if they're using 7 gallons of new water as opposed to 100 gallons in your driveway. So I think that car washes are a good thing, that way.
Yeah.
I think we need to keep that conversation open. I think it's an important part of just today's society. Who wants to drive around in a dirty car?
I'll scan that letter and shoot it out to each of you.
Okay, anything else that you want me to take back as I go to rewrite this and get it back on a schedule for a subsequent meeting?
Should we talk pool? Is everyone comfortable with the pool taking out exact square footage of the grass?
So this one essentially says if they're going to add a pool, then they need to reduce enough grass so that the pool doesn't become additional consumption that they could have had if they had maxed out their irrigation using grass. There's no more definition than that, so there's going to be a little bit of push and pull, I'm sure, between an applicant and the staff that are looking at it. But I don't know. I just think that grass and pools are so different that it's hard to be any more specific than that.
And I would consider hot tubs and koi ponds and whatever else.
Yeah, so the definition of pool is exactly how you mentioned. It's any exterior or outdoor pool of water for swimming, ambience, or landscaping. So yeah, your koi pond would be looked at as a water consumptive use, just like a swimming pool or a hot tub would be. I think that the way we wrote it leaves motivation on the applicant. If they're going to put a pool cover on, they can tell staff, look, we're going to put a cover on. It'll have these conservation metrics, so allow us to keep more grass if that's their desire. If it's just going to be a koi pond with a sprinkler that runs all day and is, built and managed in a way that it's going to evaporate a lot of water, I think they should expect that staff will, expect that they remove more grass.
I just don't want to leave that up to the staff. I think it should be just clear cut on what we're deciding in our document, because I hate when opinions get thrown into what should happen. I think this is the ordinance. This is what it is.
What's the clear cut you want in there, and I'll put it in there.
So
I know, right? That's why
are we going to do
There was
500? Oh, I'm sorry.
Say there's no 50% baseline for me to just fall on easily.
So let's say you have a 20 by 40 pool, 800 square feet. Is my math correct? Are we trading that 800 square feet of pool for 800 square feet of grass?
So if you've got an 18,000 square foot yard, they've got up to 1,250 square feet of grass, and they come in and say, we're going to put a pool in. We would look at the size of the pool, and then we would say, look, you're going to put in a pool that uses 800 square feet of water. So you need to reduce down to 425 square feet of grass, and then you can put your pool in. That's the really, with Crayola crayon roughshod analysis. Yeah.
So what are you thinking?
I think we should back it off just a little.
We have to remember that this isn't only going to be an ordinance, but it's also going to be what new homeowners use as a guide. Right. When they come and they want to build a home in Washington, they'll look at this, and that will help be their guide. So I think we always have to remember how that's going to look to a new.
So I'll just read the language.
Resident.
This is the language that staff would apply. The landscape plan, including the pool, these are the last two sentences of 88-4. The landscape plan, including the pool, shall not use a greater amount of water than a property would be permitted to consume if the landscape plan did not include a pool. And so if we can write that more specifically, I'm happy to do it.
So my idea is, so you have 1,000 square feet of grass allowed, just for easy math. You can say if you wanted to do, I'm thinking 75%. So say you wanted 1,000 square foot pool, you could still put in 25% more grass. Does that make sense?
So you got 1,000 square foot grass allowance, 1,000 square foot pool. You're saying they could still get 250 square feet of pool of grass?
Because there's not.
Just put a little trim of grass or something, because I just sit and think, and I don't know, I can't give a reference of how big.
So you're saying it's 75 cents to $1.
Yeah.
that
Yeah,
a dollar
because
for
you're not
dollar.
going to put in a pool that's, well, I couldn't afford to put in a pool that's 20 by 50 if you were using that 1,000 as a.
Yeah, and that's a big pool. I'm just saying, like, it'd
So
be
I think
nice
you should
to
be able to have some grass.
just have some grass. I mean,
I think you could do that and say, but it has to have all of the pool conservation measures, right? Pool covers, all of the stuff that.
I agree with that because that helps with the. I mean, we know in the summer they probably won't cover them, but at least we're trying in the winter and when we can.
The other thing about pools is they're a little bit more of a luxury item, right? I mean, you don't have a starter home with a pool typically, and I've seen a lot of pools, and rather than having natural turf, they'll do artificial turf by the pool, which maybe there's an easy workaround of saying, hey, we have a pool, we have some artificial turf, and maybe they have artificial turf in the front and back, or maybe there's a provision to have a little bit of natural turf in the front yard. But I think that's coming on board too.
So
We could potentially do a little bit of research to come up with a number that we felt like works.
I threw out 75.
If you just want to do 75,
I think we should come up with a number, just because it's a little bit vague right now. Just so people know, like Councilman Ivy said, they use it as a guide when they're planning their.
It's really not 1-to-1.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, just we
depends.
wish we'd have built our pool smaller. So I would look to say, a smaller pool gets the same effect. So something that can find a good balance, I think, as you're talking, but also maybe even keep those pools from being bigger than they need to be, and a shape that makes it easy to cover them. Some of those things would be.
The analysis is just, it's really hard because they're so different, right? Do you count the fill gallonage? Because if you count the gallons to fill the pool, pools are already way less efficient than grass to start out, because grass doesn't need 20,000 gallons or whatever it is, right? And then you talk about the maintenance once they're up and going. And if you maintain your pool with the right measures, I think it's not as water consumptive. But then there's the folks that like to drain and replace their pool on a regular basis, or anyway. So there's so many factors that it's just hard to be perfect in the analysis. I think we just need to give something that staff and people that want to build pools can at least understand what we're asking them to do.
so could we look at 75%, and then we can bring some examples like we're going to do with the grass and say, here's a yard, here's how large it is, this is what they'd be allowed to do. I think that might help us to understand a little bit better.
Okay. I think that was the last area of just kind of definition. I'll bring it back to council with a bunch of edits to reflect the discussion tonight, with some examples of, non-invasive on people's personal privacy, but, Google type images of just general, these are lots of this general size. We know it's a 13,000 square foot lot. Here's, how they're doing it. And that might help with how the council falls on some of the final numbers.
Can you remind me when the timing starts on the implementation? Is it at building permit, or is it at final plat? That this would take effect on a
This would
subdivision?
become effective law as soon as the council passes it, after having complied with the appropriate public notice measures. And so it would apply to anybody that comes in with a building permit after that date.
It's the permit. That's the trigger. Okay.
Council, this is really valuable conversation, because one of the bills that's making its way through the legislature right now is a bill that would require water to be included in the general plan. And so all these conversations we have now will just be a great backdrop for that, for those discussions to come.
Can I ask one more question on this? I'm a little bit interested in, it talks a lot of specifics about the sprinkling systems and stuff like that. And so I'm a little bit interested in, maybe Drew can speak to this, I don't know. Has the building department kind of looked at how many inspections? Or, I mean, because when we implement this, we could, add 3 different inspections, to make sure everything's just right. Or we could go as simple as having them just sign a copy of the ordinance that they read it, they understand it, that they're going to do it, and then we wouldn't have to inspect. I mean, one thing I'm a little concerned about is adding a whole bunch of inspections to, to the builders and the homeowners.
And when you have to do it, because what if they choose to not do it all at once? Like the front yard
Exactly.
versus back
Yeah,
yard.
because most people will
and-
get their front yard done because most of their HOAs require it, and then they wait on their
Yeah.
backyard, and then when does that kick in?
Exactly.
Do we want to?
And I'm just kind of concerned about the nuts and bolts of this, and is it going to become a huge burden to builders and homeowners, the inspection part of it and the landscaping packet part of it? Is it going to become a burden on the building department because it's 3 more inspections and we got to hire another couple of inspectors, so I'd like to kind of discuss that a little bit. I mean, what are your thoughts on it, Drew, as you look at this?
Mine are pretty simple. I'm just going to, because the water is Lester's responsibility, I'm just going to throw it on his back and see. I was waiting for that. So no, we really haven't talked much about that, to be honest with you. Because so much is going with the Conservancy, all this, and so we haven't really come down, until this is done. Where are we going to throw that in? And it may be a combination of that. There's going to be things we can't comprehend right now. Again, just thinking about the front yard versus the backyard, because again, it's very, very common that people don't get all their landscaping done at once, unless they buy a parade home and it's already done for them. But other than that, it's odd that a backyard, it usually comes anywhere from a month after being in there to the next 2 years for some cases.
Because what I'm seeing here, there's some of the things that can be just in inspections that we already do. The hot water loop can be done at underground. The water circ pump can be done at your final inspection. But some of the, if we really are gonna get nitpicky about their sprinkling systems, well, that looks like another possible 2 inspections. If you do one when their trenches are open and then you do another one. I mean, and how many, we're already having a hard time inspecting our projects as it is.
And to be honest, I did dwell on this just a little bit, and I thought, to be honest with you, I think the city needs to just have a person, an employee that just does that, because that's all they have to deal with.
So
I don't want to burden it on my, a building inspector. I have to be looking at plants because it gets, I think the comment was life safety stuff. Did someone say that? I can't remember, but no, I'm not. I'm just saying that for them to have to, learn that. I really think that that's almost what we'd need to do, is just have someone who's really on top of that, and that's all that they deal with.
So,
and
I know we've thought about it a little bit, is the final answer. We don't want to put in an ordinance that we're not intending to have a mechanism for plan review and for inspection. The difficulty with one person is you can't do one person. They have to take days off. They get sick. So we'd add it to the burden of somebody, and it could end up in Public Works with stormwater inspectors or something like that. But if you can spread that out over a group of people, it tends to be a little more efficient. But there's no doubt it will be extra cost, and we've had some discussion on who should pay that cost. And my contention is that this Water Conservancy District should help pay that cost. St. George at one point wanted them to do the inspections. I don't like that, because I don't like putting that on another third party now that that we're waiting on plan review, we're waiting on inspections from another. I like to have that in-house, but I hope they participate in the cost.
So right now, the Washington County Water Conservancy District, if I go to build a house, and if it's a larger size lot, I have to get the reduced rate. I've got to go in and the homeowner has to sign a paper and notarize it, and it's actually recorded that they won't irrigate more than, I don't know, is it 10,000 square feet or something like that? Okay. So is it possible to save money, and is it possible to do something like that with this ordinance, where we say, okay, when they come to pick up their building permit packet, one of the items that they have to turn in is the ordinance, and they have to read it, sign it, notarize it, and we can record it. And what they're saying is they understand the ordinance, they will implement that. It's on the honor system, basically. They know the penalties because they've read it. And that would save us a lot of money and a lot of burdensome, and cost and things like that on the city and on the homeowner. But we would just trust them to take our guidelines and to implement those. I'm just throwing that out there. Is that a possibility?
I think it's a great point. And I have to look at the overall, if you do hire somebody, what is the actual difference that can be made? I mean, we've talked about informing, our residents. We've talked about imploring for their compliance, and we've talked about addressing those habitual wasters that we could ask for corrective action, and then if that doesn't come about. But I just think that it's a better way forward. Maybe I'm naive, maybe I am, but I just think that the soft hand in this case, I think will be better heard than any type of a heavy hand. And like I said, maybe I'm naive. I know the residents that I know in Washington they're wonderful people. They recognize the need for this. And I think with a little bit of help and direction, I think it's better served than trying to insist on compliance. Because ultimately, if we did have one person and 33,000 people, I mean, that's still a pretty big, apple to eat. Anyway, that's my thought. I totally agree with you, Councilman Henderson. I think that's a better way forward.
Well, and if we go to final inspection and the inspector looks at the yard and it's like, this has 4,000 square feet of grass. Well, then at that point, we can
got a problem.
Send somebody over there. But I think generally people want to, do what they're supposed to be doing, and they understand that we live in a desert. And if they have some guidelines to read, and if they sign that they read them, they understand the penalties, then maybe we could at least try that out and see if if that doesn't make more sense. Then, it kind of seems like we're gonna upend our whole entire system, hiring new employees to inspect and, making sometimes government has a tendency to make things more complicated and more expensive than they need to be, turning something that should be very simple into something more complicated and expensive than it needs to be, and I think a lot of people, everybody I know is on board with saving water, but one concern I have is that we turn that enthusiasm for saving water into, oh man, this Washington City, now I've got all this extra paperwork, all these extra inspections, turning the enthusiasm into something else, and I'm just throwing that out there. I'm wondering if that's a possibility to do it that way.
I like that you have the paper, it's signed, notarized, and then recorded on the property. Because it's not always the guy that just buys the house, it's the next owner and the owner after that. Hopefully the title companies will be showing them, hey, by the way, hopefully we need to get all the title companies on board saying, when they do show them all those papers, turn that one kind of a light pink color. So they say, hey, by the way, we're a water, conserving area. So you need to be aware of that. But I think we can take care of all of it. Again, and right now it's tough because you saw the building permit numbers up so high. So my guys are already, burdened. But I think if things come down, we can take care. We can do whatever's needed to get done.
I'm concerned both for the city, but I'm also concerned for the property owners and the builders, not putting a huge burden on them as well. So,
we live.
Oh, sorry.
No.
Okay. Well, just to go along with what you were saying, Councilman, I had some individuals reach out and their thoughts are to have it be based upon, water rates. And I just want to read what someone shared with me. He said the price approach puts the consumer in the driver's seat. Wise consumers will find ways to conserve and reduce consumption in ways heavy-handed government will not achieve. And so I just feel like you're bringing up some really good points about all this.
And I think we can find the least onerous way to handle it. If I think about other things like, there are good actors and bad actors, right? There are good landscapers, and there are some that would not necessarily care to comply, and they'd want you to kind of oversee that. But I think we could certainly start a process.
Well, and I
that
want to
allows
build
for
on
that.
Councilmember Casperson's comments there, because Utah code actually requires all public water providers to have tiered water rates. And so the district has advocated for more aggressive municipal tier rate structure locally as a conservation measure. And so they're now looking to each municipality, basically us, to implement the same thing as a part of this equation. So that's certainly something that I've heard from both of you talk about, and something that the district's in favor of.
And there's pros and cons. You know, price is the free market solution, which I really like. But if your solution becomes price, you're not just focusing on new development. Like, that immediately forces people to redo their yards if it becomes prohibitively expensive, right? And so we're trying to come up with a solution in a situation where you've got old yards, recent yards, and then yards to be built next year. This is just looking at the new right now. And we've said all along, we're going to need other solutions for the existing and for the other categories that aren't addressed here. Price would hit it quickly for all of those.
But your point is well taken. That's a little bit outside of the scope of this conversation. But I do appreciate your comments on the enforcement. I think we've had a good discussion tonight on this. Are there any other
Well, we do have,
notes that you have on this, or any other points on the?
not on this one, we do have staff and organization for new development, right? And so we'll just need to build onto that, whatever we learn the demands become. The rehabilitated land yards, we don't have anything for that. That'll become stuff we just have to learn as we go. I'll make edits, I'll bring it back to you. Again, you don't have to pass it if you don't want to. I think that the legislature wrapping up will be about the same time that we're talking about this again, so we'll know better information on any state law that comes about. And then I'll work with the manager. We'll get examples of just kind of aerial views of yards and, square footages to give a good feel of what's happening out there already.
Can I just ask a request that what you do change, we can just keep it in red or something so we can keep track?
Yeah, I'll bring you a new original plus a red line to show you what changed.
Thank you.
Thad, how long are you going to want, or you think this council will need for items 13B and C? I'm wondering if we need a 5-minute break.
I would leave the 5-minute break decision up to you, but I think they'll go quicker than this one. But I think it's probably time for the 5-minute break.
We'll take 5. Let's reconvene at 7 o'clock. That's a little more than 5.
still they're warm in the water or evaporate.
You want it as cool as possible. The ground. That's good. That's good to know.
Sunrise is usually the coolest time of the day.
For my 5 minutes.
Gun Bishop is a professional landscaper. He's over this Cedar City County. He's concerned and the sun. He said the best time of year fires I always thought like 1 or 2
Let it soak in just a little bit before the sun comes up.
yeah.
You ready, man?
So like between 4 and 6.
That's a good point.
All right, it's almost 7 o'clock. We'll look to reconvene the meeting. All right, let's continue on with our meeting. We'll move along with item 13B, which is a review of proposed shade tree ordinance. Counsel, City Attorney Thad Sigmiller, we'll turn to you again for this agenda item.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. This is a proposed repeal and replace. So we've got an existing street trees ordinance. It's in Title 6, Chapter 4. This is essentially building upon that. This ordinance came about from the Shade Tree Committee. There's elements of it that just make it more defined and determined as to how we manage street trees, park trees. I do want to make sure that it's clear from the beginning. That this does not apply to, there's one small section that applies to private trees. It's just to public trees or trees that are planted by requirement of the council along a public space. You know, development comes in, says we're going to put a trail through here, and we say we want trees along there. So that's the scope. The purpose and intent, again, is just to replace and repeal, to add on to what we've already got. But in section 641, recognize that trees attribute substantial economic, environmental, and aesthetic values. And then provide a plan so that the spaces be developed according to a standard for maintenance, easements, rights of way, and other places. And so that's the concept here. Like all ordinances, you'll see the definitions. The two definitions I wanted to call out were number 4, shade tree. So a shade tree is defined as any tree planted within the city right of way on either side of all streets, lanes, trails, or ways within the city. So again, we're talking about trees within the city or the public space, if you will. And then park tree, number 5. Park tree means any tree or other woody vegetation in public parks having individual names in all areas owned by the city or areas to which the people have free access as a park. So I look at those because those are the types of trees that the rest of it all is talking about, just so you're aware as we bring those up. 643 designates the establishment of a tree advisory board. We've got the shade tree committee that's been operating for several years. I anticipate that will just be rebranded as the tree advisory board. They meet quarterly. It includes folks like Leo Tobler and Lee Bunnell, folks that are interested in trees and horticulture. And they enjoy coming and kind of talking trees and plants every quarter. It also includes Paul Walker from our Parks Department. And certainly the mayor with his executive authority could influence, that board to the extent that he wants to get involved. Throughout this ordinance, we have most of the executive decision-making go to the Parks and Rec director or his assignee, which I would guess would probably be Paul Walker. And so we don't elevate it to the mayoral level. If the council wants us to, we can, but we're kind of leaving it in the Parks Department since they're the ones that do a really good job with the trees. You'll see some of the purposes of the tree advisory board in there. Basically become a recommending body. It's a volunteer body. But they do recommend, the regulations and the future of how we manage trees in our city. You'll see in 644 how we administer the ordinance. Again, authorities in the Parks Director. There will be a desirable shade tree list there. Section 2 will publish the city's list of the type of trees we want them planting in the public or public spaces. Public awareness will make those available. Various measures, I would assume, on our website, as well as available at the planning and zoning, any places that we have the public coming in to talk about planting and development. 645 is talking about maintenance and care by the city. This basically authorizes the city staff to enter spaces, manage and maintain trees as necessary. The next section is maintenance and care by the citizens. Mostly here, we're telling the citizens not to do things that we don't want them to do to public trees. But they do have the right, because sometimes these trees impact private property, they do have some rights and authorities. At the end of the day, we'd just like them to call our Parks Department and, we'd work on whatever that tree issue needs. You'll see at section 3 of that, we start to address some of the specifics of trimming adjacent properties and trees that overhang, stumps that are left. We don't want stumps to be left. We want them to be removed. Section 5 is abuse or mutilation. This does make it a criminal offense if you're going to abuse or mutilate a public tree. Our city doesn't have a problem with this, but we thought that if we're going to write an ordinance, we had to give it at least some enforceability. And so that's where this is. I would say the most abused public trees we have are at the ballpark, but it's usually, little brothers that are 2 years old just wishing they could swing the bat at a ball and they're swinging at a tree. And so I don't anticipate we're enforcing it against those type of folks, but if there was a problem, this would give us the chance to do it. 6, if you're going to remove or replace a shade tree, we give them some guidelines there as to things to consider when you do so. 7, there are a few exceptions here, which basically allows you to come to the city and talk about, the exceptional circumstance and why it needs to be addressed. We talk about other plantings because there are sometimes other types of plants in the public spaces. 648 then has some standards and just expectations for new development. Mostly it's just kind of general guidelines similar to what we've seen in the water ordinance. We then talk about shade trees in previously developed areas. Mostly those are replacements or removals as necessary. Then we talk about 6410, care and maintenance of private trees that affect public property.
Thad, can I stop you real quick? Just a question on the root guard under the shade trees and new development. And we're just talking along city roads. Do we require in our parks to do those?
No. If it's next to a sidewalk or something, Parks Department basically will come say, we want root guard here or there. To just put it on one side isn't very effective. And so usually root guard's in a box or a planter that's got.
It's just not very, it just says root guard is defined as here shall be installed as described. And so.
So 645.
I missed that part.
Root guard is defined as root guard products, devices, or that accomplish the same or similar results as a root guard application shall be used on all trees near sidewalks or asphalt. So, so that's the reference. And so still not totally defined. There will be some discretion based on, staff's review, but we're at least saying if it applies to that situation, we're going to ask you to install root guard.
I'm not even sure what a root guard is.
So root guard, in our planter boxes along Telegraph, we have root guard installed. And what it is they dig down and they put in a physical barrier so the roots cannot expand out of the defined growth area. One of the things that we've learned is we planted ash trees that grow large, and so they get large caliper trunks, and their roots also are trying to get out of it. And so we've learned some lessons with those boxes that we should have maybe stayed with trees that are a little more adapted to staying within a defined area. But yeah, we just want when the circumstances justify for them to install it with root guard. Sometimes there's private trees that we consider to be public, and I tried to say, which ones are those, and I hesitate to list one because I don't even want to create an issue for a property owner. But you'll know, previous Mayor Clove has a big old mulberry tree in his yard that's on private. But it's got a history that's as long as our city.
Historic, absolutely.
And that might be an example where we as a city would claim some public interest, and we'd want them to at least maintain it consistent with these standards. That said, if it becomes a public risk or a danger, we would be okay with them taking care of that public risk or danger if it was necessary. 6411 provides an appeal. I like this. Basically, if somebody's not happy with what Parks directors told them to do, they have a right to have it looked at by somebody other than that Parks director. And then 6412, we talk about the penalties and enforcement of this provision. Again, the only one that we're really trying to enforce is mutilation or damage to public trees. Any questions on the concept? Okay, I'll meet with Paul Walker and Barry, make sure that there's nothing else that they want to, adjust or amend, and then we'll get this on a future agenda for consideration for approval.
And Paul Walker was heavily involved in the drafting of the ordinance. He's just such a trusted and good resource on this type of thing. I imagine he was.
This ordinance started when Dave Jordan was leading that department, and then Paul followed through, and Paul's been really instrumental in getting it to the council.
Yeah, he's a great great person to be on that.
If you're okay, I'll go to the next one, Mayor.
Yeah, item 13C is a review of proposed construction noise ordinance.
So we've had a noise nuisance ordinance for a long time, but we've not ever had the specificity that this has. This came about from our code enforcement folks saying, look, we have complaints of noise, but we don't have any standard to hold them to. And so this is just trying to draw a specific standard. The reason why it's focusing on construction is that's the one noise that is the most common complaint. But you'll see, and generally in 8-8-101, it shall be unlawful for any person to disturb the peace or quiet of any neighborhood. And then it defines the type of noises. And so in theory, code enforcement could bring an offense based on that section. But really the main motivation here is 8-8-102, which says it's unlawful for any person to engage in excavation, construction, demolition, basically construction activities between the hours of 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. However, we do pull out a concrete period during the summer. 10 and 6 are just, again, your attorney putting in times that he thinks might make sense. Whatever you want to put in there, we'll certainly do. But the idea was, we drew that from Ivans. It's just to codify a construction period and then also a period when we can talk to our concerned citizens. Yeah, that the quiet time should be 10 to 6 or whatever the council has designated. You'll see there at the end of 102, if unusual circumstances exist that would cause hardship, the applicant can talk with the city manager and ask the city manager to address the unusual circumstance. Essentially give the city manager some authority to,
So do we want to do it with the, I'm not trying to take powers away from Jeremy. I think of special circumstances like on a construction site, and I'm not thinking home, I'm thinking public works where you're like, hey, we gotta pave tonight, right?
Yeah.
Like, is there a better process than having to, I'm gonna say bug Jeremy on this kind of thing, unless he's okay with it? I'm just thinking, is it the public works director adequate enough instead of going all the way up the chain to say, yes, I can give that leeway on.
I would be okay with that. The city manager might not like to be pulled out. I'm just kidding. I wrote it as a city manager, but I think that it could be whoever you think. You'll see at 103 deals with emergencies. So this is really non-emergency special circumstances because there is an emergency provision, as there should be.
And if that makes sense, I would direct it to whoever. If it's a home, I would think there's nothing. I mean, I can't think of any. Maybe you can think of some that required midnight working.
No, I really like this. Very well written, very thoughtful, especially the concrete part of it. And there are mostly on commercial projects where they'll pour throughout the night, starting at 10 p.m. And so, that would be one of the circumstances where.
Do you want me to change that to Public Works Director?
The only thought I have on that, and I certainly don't care if it's me, but it might be a little easier to hit up the Public Works Director and ask them for exceptions. It might be a little more, it might be another barrier for them to have to come to the city manager, who I don't work with them all the time.
My thought was city manager, because they're not already involved in the development process. The city manager would be somebody that's mostly not talked or thought about this much, but I don't think this is
we could also write it or
huge issue.
designee, and then we could designate it to somebody else if it wasn't an issue.
I just want to make sure that they have that option because of these scenarios that we could have quite often. It just might, it's just not an everyday thing, but it could be like, hey, we have this pour coming. And I see it as concrete. Those guys work way early in the morning.
Yeah, and I was thinking about roofers, because I know especially in summertime, roofers hours, I mean, it's just so prohibitive to be on
3's perfect for concrete, but for some commercial projects, they pour all night long.
3's
so that
perfect
would
for
be,
sleep.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
You got a point. I just finished a bridge and we poured all night long.
Yeah.
There was that much mud to pour. It just came all night long. So,
But I think we could have a discussion with them then about what they're going to do to mitigate noise. So we could have that conversation at least.
The exception does have to be in writing, and then the permitted exception has to also be in writing. So they've got to make a written request, and then if they're going to be given an exception, it's got to be in writing. And the main reason is so our code enforcement folks aren't just, hey, I talked to so-and-so and he told me I could. Like, it has to be a documented exception.
And I could see this process being, the contractor developer goes to the public works director, community development director, they reach out to the manager, they have a conversation, and the written exception is issued. So I don't have a hard line on either, but there's some.
Jeremy would
logic to that.
probably already have a good idea of which projects would need his approval. Generally, really large commercial projects, and he'd already be in the loop on that. So,
Yeah, I think you want the exception person to be, the officers that gotta, enforce something. It would be somebody that's there.
So to add a couple of things, first of all, was there any consideration for holidays or Sundays? I mean, I know those are just days of the week and they fall on different days. And then the other thing is, would there be a need to enforce this if they were in an area where there was just new construction and there wasn't residents in that area, like Long Valley, where no one's sleeping there yet?
So we decided not to tell them what days of the week they can work.
Or holidays.
Yeah, we thought that by giving residents a guaranteed quiet period, that we would allow them to, work on whatever day of the week they think is best for them. Our challenge with, and I like your questions, because you went right to where I went. If we carve out a Long Valley area, what do we do when there's phase 1 that's built out and phase 3 that's working, right? So our challenge was, how do we write an ordinance that protects people that then come and occupy, most of our complaints come from a previously built phase that's upset with how noisy the next phase is, right? And so Long Valley at first is the perfect idea of, hey, nobody's going to hear it. But pretty soon there will be people within Long Valley that are probably going to be the complainants. So I didn't know how to fix that, so I just didn't carve that out. I just, basically, if somebody's complaining, we'll have we already respond to the complaints. We just don't have the definition to kind of resolve them. But if we get a complaint, we'll respond. We'll figure out what time of day it is. And if it's Sunday morning at 11 a.m., we'll tell them, look, we allow people to do construction at 11 a.m., even if it's on Sunday. I'm sorry that your kid was waking from a nap, right? If it's outside of the time period, though, we'll be able to enforce and take a decision about what to do with the circumstances that are out there.
Okay.
A lot of the CCNRs now in new subdivisions prohibit workers from being there on Sundays and holidays. So,
yeah.
The holiday's a loose word because if you work for the government, you get a lot more holidays than you work in the private. So, yeah, I just don't want to get into the holidays, and I don't like that. I think they can work whenever they can work as long as we give them that break of those few hours at night. Because I mean, no one wants to hear hammering at 11 o'clock at night. That's for sure. But
the idea was really to carve out a quiet time for residents that we can ask our staff to enforce. And outside of that, we're really just responding and explaining to people, this is the law, this is what we allow, this is what we don't. They're within the allowed period. We'll go ask them and see if they can mitigate it and let them know that there's some complaints, but we're not going to cite people that are doing construction during a certain time. You'll see in 104, cease and desist, you would give law enforcement some authority to issue a cease and desist if necessary. And then a penalty again would be penalized as a minor Class B misdemeanor. Any questions or amendments you want on that, or just bring it back as is?
I like it.
Okay, Mayor, that wraps up 13C, I think.
Thank you, Thad. We'll move on to item 14B. I'll call for a motion to move into closed session to discuss pending or potential litigation.
So moved.
I have a motion by Councilmember
Second.
Martinson and a second by Councilmember Coates. This is not an open hearing. I decided.
Open hearing. This is.
I'll call
This is
for
the
a
public
roll call
meeting.
vote. Martinson, Henderson, Coates,
aye.
Mr. Sigmund,
Ivy.
Mr.
Aye.
Staley,
Casperson.
you are the chief executive of this town.
All right, we'll
and
move
you
into closed session.
The
Thank
laws
you.
are executed. You just committed a felony. You need to know that. Pattern of unlawful activity, which is continuing, is a second-degree felony when you violate that statute. Are you sure you want to do that? And failure of duty is Utah Code Section 76-8-201, and that is another episode in the pattern of unlawful activity.